Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this Saturday morning on a very productive day we're going to have today. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Maruniak, if you would call the roll, please.
Mr. Brian Davis.
Here.
Mr. Matt Staley.
Here.
Mrs. Jean Whitting.
Here.
Mrs. Shelley Garrett.
Here.
Mr. Bradley DeCamp.
Here. Thank you. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
For which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And again, good morning. Mr. Orsina, are you on this morning?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you for joining us, taking some time out of your busy schedule to give us some updated information. Mr. Baird, you kind of fill us in on what Mr. Orsina is going to be talking about.
Yes, thank you, Jason, for being here.
Hang on a second. Just hit the mute there.
Thank you, Jason. And Jason is here to give us just a general update of what's going on in our area and the community with the COVID-19 virus. Jason keeps us updated with weekly meetings and interpretation of guidance as we move forward through this. So Jason, thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. Happy to join you this morning. I apologize. I will stay on as long as you have questions, but as soon as you're done with me, I will log off so I can join another meeting that's already in progress. Short version, based on what Superintendent Baird had requested, just an overview of what the data situation looks like. What are we seeing case counts? The easiest description, as a matter of fact, I did a very deep dive into looking at the data experience for Union County over the last 4 or 5 months. If I was to give you the best analogy, I'd say we're back to where we were at early November. Now, keep in mind, early November meant we're still seeing very high transmission in the community. We still see a lot of ED visits, a lot of hospitalizations, but it's better than where we were at the end of November. So we have seen a decrease in new cases. It is not where we want it to be, but it has come down somewhat. Now, the fact that we see new cases go down, but positivity, meaning the number of people who actually test positive, is going up sharply. It is even doubled on the number of weeks from where we were in early December, means we're probably also not capturing a lot of the transmission that's going on in community. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Recognize the fact that our ED and hospitalization rates remain fairly stable within a narrow band. In fact, what I looked at was sort of just what's the banding of high low points over the last 5 months. And what we find is there can be a lot of volatility in a given measure any given day or week, but it's still following a very stable trend for the past 3 months. Again, being higher than we would like. So the overall picture, I would say, is overall, we're fairly stable at this higher rate, which I think some of you may have heard me say before. Some positive signs potentially, but given the positivity rate and the fact our testing is actually going down, we're not seeing as many people through testing, there's a reason to be cautious with that. What I've told the superintendents and other districts is, given the very good experience schools have had with their mitigation efforts, the mask wearing, compliance, the cleaning, the ability to get distancing. When we couple that with new quarantine guidance that came out relative to school-age children, I think there's reason for you to evaluate your district level practices and decide whether this would be a good time to move back into K through 5 in particular, full-time learning. This would be a good time to evaluate it. The only caveat I put on any district and any school board with that, just monitor your data. And if you start to see cases rise or explode again within the school district, you already have the tools in place. You're already flexible. Just be flexible and be prepared to shift back if you need to. So from that perspective, I think the decisions that I'm hearing superintendents make, I'm very comfortable with and more than happy to support, as long as everyone remains flexible with what we need to monitor for. Separate from that, one of the things, tools that we have that's available for school districts moving forward is rapid testing. So we have put in a request from the state and have already received the test for both Binax Now testing, and then we have another testing supply that we have purchased as well for school districts' use if the Binax Now, and we purchased those before the Binax Now became an even larger order from the federal government. So we have two mechanisms at this point to try to deploy to school districts. The first, the Binax Now testing, we will deploy by the end of this month. That's fingers crossed. There's no hiccups or barriers actually next week. Right now they're in boxes in our office. We want them out of our office, to be perfectly blunt. And we want them in the hands of people who are going to use them. So what I've encouraged school districts to do is take those, use them for your faculty and staff first and get a feel for how they work. And then you are able to use them with students, is our understanding as well. Do that once you have a comfort level with process. It is a telehealth. There's not really any liability on part of the school board relative to the distribution or use of these tests. They are take-home tests, but you have to identify a point of contact, and you take responsibility for making sure those tests are collected, distributed appropriately, that sort of thing. So we're working through that process now. The other test that we purchased is also a rapid test. But there's a little more administration to it, and there's some legal back-end paperwork on our part we're trying to get sorted out if we deploy those to school districts. But both of those hopefully will be in your repertoire of actions here all through February through the end of the year. Those are the two main points. Superintendent Baird, was there another item you wanted me to cover this morning?
I think if we could have the ability for any board members to ask questions if they have questions, would be the best next step.
Certainly.
Hi, how concerned are you about the new variant, that what is more easily spread, more quickly spread? Do we see it at all in Central Ohio?
So there's actually a couple variants that are out right now. The one that gets most press, I want to say, I'll be honest with you, I get my variant confused with mine. I think it's the UK variant is the one that most people are referring to right now. It is stateside. It is moving. There is an expectation that it could become a dominant variant during this school year. It will become the dominant variant. I've heard different reports on that. The biggest concern with that variant is it is more transmissible than the current strain. So the original Wuhan strain that we've been dealing with, this is more transmissible. Now, in my world, that's saying something, because we're already dealing with a virus that's much more transmissible than seasonal flu, which is transmissible enough. We're dealing with a virus that's already incredibly dangerous in terms of severe long-term impact, morbidity associated with those who recover, and to be blunt, mortality. It kills a lot of people, much more than any flu virus we've seen in 100 years. So to have a strain that is more transmissible does bring concern. This UK variant, original reports did not show that it caused more severe illness. There are reports that some of the new variants may do that. And just as a side note, if I can, Ms. Wedding, with your permission, part of the concern from public health officials when we have this constant transmission within a community, all viruses mutate the more they are transmitted from person to person. And all viruses mutate every year. That's why we have a flu shot that changes every year, because we know there's some genetic drift, there's some mutations, and then we have to create a new vaccine to target that. If we cannot get this under control over the next several months and slow transmission, and we have another strain that is more transmissible, it's just going to increase the likelihood of further mutation. And eventually we're going to hit on a strain that is either going to be more severe or more difficult to control than what we're already dealing with. So from that perspective, there are concerns. Now, this is where I go back to my original point. The practices in the school districts has been exceptionally well managed. The superintendents and the staff and the students and families deserve a lot of credit for that. That gives you the opportunity to try to move forward to more in-person learning if that is what the comfort level of the community and the board is pointing to. If this strain comes in March, which is one of the expectations, could be March, April, and we start to see an increase in transmission, more cases again, then that's when the school board would have the ability to say, we're starting to see that spread. I'm going to communicate it to Superintendent Baird pretty quickly once it's identified, or if we start to see that strain in Central Ohio, and then we would want to take action at that point. This is also where the school board as an entity can have a large influence on your student body. We need all students who are ill to get tested and be identified that they're spreading coronavirus. Because when we can't identify folks that are ill, that means the likelihood that they spread to someone else and eventually that hits a vulnerable person just goes up exponentially.
Mhm.
And right now, when I said we're seeing a decrease in cases, but an increase in positivity, it means we're not finding everyone who's sick, and it's already a difficult task. It also means when we look at the data, the number of people dying each week hasn't really shifted, and the number of people hospitalized hasn't shifted dramatically. It's a very volatile statistic, but over time, it's remaining at this higher rate. So we've seen the majority of our deaths in Union County have occurred since November. I mean, we had 4 deaths going in at the end of October, and we're now at 28. And I'm sure this week we don't have final counting, but we'll have a couple more probably.
Thank you.
Mr. Orsino, just to be clear on the quarantine for K through 12, if they are exposed in the classroom environment, they can still come to school, but they cannot do anything outside of school. Is that outside of the school building? Is that how I'm interpreting that? Is that correct?
Partially. So there's some conditions on some of that. Right now, the guidance is K through, per conversations with the state and clarifications with the state, and all the superintendents I met on this, we're doing K through 5 buildings to start with. The state indicated that guidance was intended for K through 5 for that reduced quarantine requirement, meaning that if you're less than 6 feet, but more than 3 feet away. So that's where we're starting and to evaluate. And then until the state gives better or clearer guidance that applies to higher grades, we're sticking with the K through 5 building. Now I say building because just recognition that when you have a building that has mixed grades, like a 6th grade is included in the building, it can be difficult to separate out those kids, and that's just recognized. Part of the rationale for ODH and saying it was K through 5 is because the infectiousness of children, those 12 and under, ostensibly the K through 5, is actually appears to be less than adolescents 12 and older. In other words, those adolescents 12 and older actually spread the disease and has the same level of infectiousness as essentially adults. So there's a very distinct difference between children and those adolescents, preteen or teenagers who are moving into more of an adult experience with the virus. So our current guidance is K through 5 buildings. When a child has an exposure, that contact or definition of exposure has not changed in the new guidance that ODH put out. They said, so within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes over the course of a day. Same guidance. The child is allowed to return to school as long as they are asymptomatic. The key piece here. It can be very difficult to identify a child, younger child that tend to have very mild illness, but asymptomatic. They can return to the classroom, but they are actually still in quarantine and should be following quarantine protocols outside of the school. So I likened it to what we do with critical infrastructure workers. A critical infrastructure worker who has an exposure with certain conditions can come back to work because as long as they're asymptomatic. And that's what we're treating students as. That the school is important enough that we're going to treat them like critical infrastructure. We're going to let them come back into the classroom as long as they're asymptomatic and they're wearing a mask, and they're never, when a mask is off, they're never closer than 6 feet to someone else.
Mr. Orsina, first off, I want to thank you for all the work you put into this and for the guidance you've offered to Mr. Baird and to the board, the schools in general. It's very much appreciated. Do you have any sort of, and I realize everything, it changes so fast, but do you have any sort of a feel for when those guidelines might be extended to 6 through 12? Obviously, your comfort level right now is K through 5, but as we talk about opening these buildings up, do you have any sort of a feel for when you might be comfortable, when the guidelines might change and we might be able to extend that to the 6 through 12 students?
I'll be very honest, at this time, I really cannot say. It's as much a factor as waiting on the state to determine its comfort level as well. The report that was used to sort of usher in this change in guidance has not actually been issued yet. A preliminary report was issued, which was just the top level. And so we are still waiting on the final report. I would like to say that once we have your students back in the classroom and have some experience with the K through 5 situation and comfort level that we're getting all students who are ill identified, especially once we have the testing in place, that will increase my comfort level dramatically. And once we have all of your teachers vaccinated, that weren't vaccinated, that will also increase my comfort to reduce the spread to those vulnerable populations. That, to be very candid.
Jason, thank you very much for being here. We'll let you get on to your meeting that's already in progress, and look forward to talking to you at least by Wednesday.
Certainly, and if any of the board members have additional questions, you are welcome to send those to me directly or reach out through Superintendent Baird. And like I said, we talk several times a week, and we have a standing meeting every Wednesday. So I can certainly try to get that back to you as soon as I can. Okay? All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for everything you guys are doing as well. I know this has been a tough year for everyone. So thank you for your work. Take care.
Hey, Matt Burgraff, can you come out here real quick? Thank you.
Nothing right now. All right, moving on. Item 4, discussion items. Tried to limit everything to 10 minutes per item. Item 1, wellness. 1A, learning level discussion and plan. Mr. Baird.
Yes, thank you. I've got a proposal together. I shared it with the board last night. There's a copy of it on your desk. Along with that is an accompanying document. Documents look like this. And that is the guidance that Jason shared, okay, with us. Maybe I didn't give it to you. Do you have a copy of this? You have this, Dean? Yeah. So what I would like to do, if I could read through the document to the board and for everyone so we can hear what it is. Our goal is for our district to return to learning level 1 before the end of 2020-21 school year. To date, we have been able to maximize our learning opportunities by making informed decisions through each of our learning levels. August 17th through September 1st, we had 12 days of professional development. September 8th through October 2nd, we had 19 days of learning level 2. October 5th through the 16th, we had 29 days of learning level 1. We had to retract back to 6 days of remote learning right there around Thanksgiving. We returned on November 30th and hybrid learning level 2 for 20 days. That's where we are now. We are currently 4 days into the second semester and 84 days remain in the school year. We continue to gather input and information from the Ohio Department of Education, Ohio Department of Health, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine's office, Union County Emergency Management Agency, the Mental Health and Recovery Board of Union County, and the Union County Health Department. We gather information through surveys, meetings, conversations from the community, staff, and students. I am beyond proud of the work of our entire community support system, Board of Education, administration, staff, parents, and students. To date, we have had 47 positive cases, actually 48 as of this morning, of COVID-19. That'd be 24 cases and 24 staff cases. The first case in the district was reported November 4th, 2020. 616 staff and students have been placed in quarantine. 317 of those were placed in quarantine due to direct contact with someone who tested positive. The rest of those, about 300 of those, the rest of those would have been, they were symptomatic and had to be tested, and they were in quarantine until those test results came back. On January 21st, 2021, interpretation of Ohio Department of Health guidance was finalized that impacted the quarantine of students at North Union Elementary School. A letter explaining that guidance is attached. In summary, the guidance applies if all of the following criteria are met. Now, this is the Reader's Digest version. The letter explains everything, and Jason Orsina just explained it very well. Basically, if you're an elementary school student, if the exposure happened classroom, then, or on school transportation, then, and the students were not within 3 feet of a positive student more than 15 minutes cumulatively in a day, then they can come to school under that same guidance, okay? As a result of this criteria, the students will still need to quarantine from all activities outside the classroom, including extracurricular activities for the required time, okay? And that required time outside of the classroom would be the 14 days. This new guidance, for example, could now prevent whole classroom quarantines like we have had previously. If you look at our quarantines, I said there were 600 and some quarantines. I would say that this would impact less than a third of those, probably 150 to 200 of those would have been impacted by this new guidance. Currently, it would only have affected maybe 1 or 2 of the quarantines, if any at all. Okay, so since the holiday, it would have impacted a very low impact. The new guidance would have given us not much more than what we currently have. Okay. As a part of the Reset Restart Plan in Learning Level 1, North Union Elementary students work in cohorts of less than 25 students. So their exposure during the day is pretty much around 25 students. This minimizes the possibility for exposure in large numbers. North Union Middle School students work in cohorts of less than 50 students, give or take. I mean, it's not perfect, but that's what we were shooting for, which also minimizes exposure. A cohort group at the high school is much more difficult to achieve because of the needs of the students and course requirements. An exposure to NUHS could possibly affect great numbers of students. In addition, most of the North Union High School student body participates in either outside of school activities and or employment. An exposure at school would prevent participation in those activities due to quarantine. And that's an issue that we also have to think about as a board. During the month of February, we hope to have started the vaccination process with our staff in cooperation with the Union County Health Department. Therefore, unless further spread is concerning enough to change learning levels in the following time frame, this is my proposal to the Board of Education as we move forward for a hopeful return to learning level 1 in on March 1st, 2021 across the board. And that's what we're shooting for, but we don't look at doing that before March 1st. The elementary school would return to learning level 1 with Wednesdays remaining remote learning days. North Union Middle School would return to learning level 1 with Wednesdays remaining as remote learning days. And the high school would continue with learning level 2 for the reasons I've listed. Now, semester 2, we will, in the next paragraph, I was able to put together and apply a little bit better this morning. And it says, identifying and providing interventions for vulnerable and credit deficient students will be a focus of the second semester and all buildings at all grade levels as we extend into the summer and the 2020-22 school year. The board knows that we got our reauthorization of CARES funding, and we are allowed to spend that on closing those gaps. And I would like to dedicate all of that to closing those gaps. And I would like to target to identify, support, and provide interventions to our students. And that's a very broad, general term, knowing yesterday what we are getting. But we will have to come up with a plan where we can target and use personnel directly to find out what those gaps are and to address those gaps. And immediately, this could include using Wednesdays for interventions. It could include summer school programming and personalized learning interventions for students. We will revisit the plan at the February 22nd, 2021 Board of Education meeting with the possibility of a full return to school on March 1st, 2021. The guidance, I summarized the guidance. Dr. Orsina summarized the guidance as far as what the new quarantine rules are. I won't read through that letter if that's okay with you, but if you have any questions about any of that, I am open to those questions now.
So I guess the only discrepancy that I see between your recommendation, you're nodding your head, yeah, and I even hesitate to bring this up because of my personal feelings about it, but the middle school is out of line with the guidelines provided by the Union County Health Department. How do we address that going forward? So again, I'm trying to leave my personal feelings out.
Yes.
Of it.
So here's your thinking with that. So up until this point, we've had guidance, and up until this point, you could see the high levels of quarantines that we had. Just like I said, and I think at the middle school, the impact of the new guidance would, even if it were in place, would even be smaller, okay? Based on what we've seen. I can tell you when you contact Trace and you talk to an elementary teacher or an elementary student or an elementary family, and you say, were they within 6 feet of other students? Most of the time the answer is, oh my, have you ever met an elementary school student yet? Where middle school students are able to keep their distance a little bit better and they understand. Now, coming back full time, inherently in the classroom, they're gonna be within 6 feet, okay? And we would have to quarantine those sitting around them. We still wouldn't have to quarantine the entire classroom necessarily, but we would have to identify who's within 6 feet at the middle school, and that would remain, and that's the way it is today, right now. So it's not, it's the new guidance helps us in some ways, but it doesn't tell us anything different than what we're currently doing, okay? And without that new guidance, my recommendation would have been the same.
Another thing I can think about, Mr. Staley, is that, we have extracurriculars in middle school as well. They're 2 weeks being finished, their extracurricular activities for this particular season that they're in. That's a conversation that we need to have and think about as a board, is that what type of message are we sending to those kids, exposing them to greater risk. They're already exposed, on the basketball floor, at extracurriculars. Are we okay with increasing that exposure with them being so close to finishing their season? So that's something we have to think about. They've invested a lot of their time in coaches, parents, the players, a lot of people are investing in that. So we have to think about that as well.
So would you maybe propose then, because the current recommendation would be February 1st, backing that off a week? I mean, would that help allay some of that fear? I mean,
I
that
guess
goes out
you
to-
got to go simple, right? You know, that's just a discussion we have, the reality situation. I think the 13th, the second week of February is the majority of the kids' season will be done by then, and then they would, there's not a lot of spring sports at the middle. There's not spring sports at the middle school, like track and travel, softball, those things. But as far as being involved inside the extracurriculars inside the building, school sponsored extracurriculars. By the 13th of February, those would pretty much be wrapped up for those kids.
Would robotics be able to continue?
Robotics would, robotics will continue, yes. But robotics, if the students are quarantined, they would still be quarantined in participation in robotics. Right, yeah. So if the students but the overall program will continue, absolutely. All programs will continue.
So then a compromise might be, just as I'm looking at my calendar here, if we were to go back the week after that at the middle school.
Sorry, can you hit your mic to make sure that all others are hearing? I just got a question. Can the questions be repeated on here?
Yeah, if their mic isn't on, which I understand that you can have.
Scott, can you get on and tell us what you didn't hear?
No. It's just, I'm just talking about for future. Just it's difficult to hear with the mask and stuff like that. So if someone doesn't have their mic on, answer that, could repeat it. Like right now, Mr. Staley had his mic on, so you were able to hear it. So just for individuals that are maybe out in the public listening.
Okay, thank you.
So what I was saying was it would, as I'm looking at my calendar, then a compromise would be the following week, because we'd effectively be talking about 2 days of in-person learning if we are going to this 4-day-a-week model. I guess if you're looking for a compromise, that would be it, to go back the following week.
I don't even know if we have to compromise. I'm just throwing it out there that we need to make sure we're aware of what we're asking those middle school parents, kids, coaches. We need to be aware as a board of what we're asking them to do and what we're, if this team's quarantined February 1st, their season's done. Okay. So are we okay as a board saying, we're going to put you in school full time, but we're also putting you at greater risk of being exposed. And also, if you become exposed, your season is basically over. Okay. So that's the reality of what Mr. Orsina just told us. And that's the reality of what we're exposing them to inside that building. Okay.
Well, I think it's tough to walk that balance. Ultimately, I think you've got to, we're in the business of educating kids, and that has to be of utmost importance. However, a big part, especially when you get to that age, and more so when you get to high school, I understand, as I think back when I was in school, I would have been pretty upset by this, and it might have affected my school performance. Right. If I were going to weight it one way or the other, I'd weight it towards the business of educating children. I think these are things that have to come into the discussion, though, for sure.
So what do you, what's your thoughts, Mr. Baird, on that?
So my thoughts remain the same. In the hybrid learning model at this point, here's 2 things. At the hybrid level at this point, the effect has not given us much classroom exposure, okay? The classroom exposure at the middle school wasn't that great when we were in the full time, particularly at the middle school. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. You know, I could be sitting here, I could make the recommendation, come back February 1st, and it falls completely on my shoulders and your shoulders that those kids didn't get to finish their season. And I can't tell you enough, Matt, I can't agree with you more. The balance is excruciating. Like it's terrible to think that, okay, well, we decide, but I think we're at the point where we need to make that decision based on that. So what I would like to do is add the item for vote and maintain this document unless the board says, hey, we really need to change that date. Okay, and then we'll go from there. That's my thoughts.
Change the date if there are numbers that begin to shift.
Well, we could always do that, and that will always be taken into consideration. But what I do mean is, I think unless the board's discussion takes us in a direction where, I mean, I can easily change this letter and say NUMS, change the date to February 13th, okay? I could do that, but I think the board needs the opportunity to vote on what I've proposed, and then through that discussion after do we need to change it, you know, and that's where we are. So I think you need the opportunity to vote on what I proposed, and I'm not sitting here saying I'm not gonna make the decision. That's why I'm saying I wanna go with what I proposed. Well, we can change it in the discussion. So once we move, and we'll have to add a motion to the agenda. And once we've made that motion, we can discuss it further and finalize that.
Just to go back to clarify exposure and this type of thing, what if you had a family that had a kid in high school and middle school? And let's say that the middle school goes back, you get an exposure, and then obviously you're living at home with a family member, then what does that do to the family member in the high school who might be participating in extracurriculars? Would they then have to be out for the 2 weeks? Or would it depend on where?
Let me repeat that to make sure I understand it. So there's a high school student who is tested positive.
I was thinking the other way, more it would be, so middle school goes back.
Yes. Yeah, okay, so a middle school student has tested positive.
Mm-hmm.
They are positive.
Yes.
So if they are positive and they have a high school brother and sister at home,
Mm-hmm.
if they live in the same home, unless you can convince that your homes are completely set, there are some people who live in homes that keep, that is an exposure. And that has nothing to do with the new guidance. So yes, they would be quarantined. Typically, the way that works is you're quarantined 14 days after the last, the exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're sitting there, a positive person, 10 days in the home, they have to quarantine those 10 days and an additional 14 days after that 10th day of exposure, right? That's then the personal experience with that. Unless they say, hey, they're in separate parts of the house. Like they locked in their bedroom. And I can tell you my own family's been through this. And the first time they tried to quarantine within the house and they thought that was gonna happen again. And they said, we can't do this anymore. So it ends up being a 24-day quarantine. The new guidance really has nothing to do with that because that's contact outside of school. Did that, okay. Well, do we want to discuss any other parts of this? Is that the only concern before we vote to?
I think the rest of this is more,
No, I mean this right here.
that.
Yeah, I think we would vote to accept this as a resolution with the Board of Education.
Oh, Well, I mean, Mr. Burgraff, do you have anything to add? You're the guy in charge there at the middle school. Anything else you want to add to the discussion?
Well, the one thing I can say is we really have only done one contact tracing throughout the year when we've gone to look at our classrooms and exposure and those types of things. I've only had to pull seating charts from classes and the lunchroom one time. So, you know, I've been a basketball coach and at every level, but academically, you know, the significant gaps, I really think that it's one of those things we're looking at as an educator. You know, we need students in the building. And, you know, to be able to make sure students are doing work is something our teachers are constantly trying to get done. You know, those students that are out 3 days a week, it is very difficult to make sure they're able to perform. So, you know, with that being said, like I said, I've pulled seating charts once, and that includes hybrid and when we've been in full session. So, you know, as an educator, I really feel we need to be in school. I also, as a basketball coach and a principal, know the effects on students with whether it's academics, whether it is VEX, whether it's basketball, football, those types of things. So, you know, as an educator, you know, my thing would be to have them back every day, all day, you know, even without the Wednesdays. So I guess that's my opinion for that.
Okay, thank you. Is Wednesday something that we want to have a discussion on? Is Wednesday 5 days a week, K through 8? Is that a discussion we want to have? Do we want to keep the Wednesday, Monday through Friday in the month of February, Wednesdays of cleaning / PD / whatever we want to call it? Start with that. Are we still comfortable with that?
Is your mic on?
No, I was just saying I particularly like the idea of the Wednesday.
Oops, hit it again. Yep, there you
I
go.
particularly like the idea of the Wednesday off so that deep cleaning can go on and some personalized specific work with individual children. And
So
students still with the feeling of being back full time. Yes.
And I would like to add the Wednesdays and some of the rationale behind that. First of all, it's definitely not a day off for staff or students. It's really a very, very, very busy day for staff. Especially we have to increase the identification of vulnerable students, and that's a great time to connect to them. And please remember, we have 210 students still in digital learning. And at the middle school and the high school, those Wednesdays are great days to make contact with those because that and their digital period are their time to make contact other than that. But those Wednesdays really open up the door to have that opportunity to communicate with the students. And just that month will be able to get us moving forward with that. And that's the month of February through March 1st.
Mrs. Allison, do you want to add anything? I'm sorry, I didn't want to leave you out as well. It affects you very importantly as well. So do you have anything to add?
No, we're pleased to, I echo what Matt says. We'd love to be back 5 days a week, but we understand the Wednesdays will help us, will help the teachers, in fact, as we navigate through preparing to help the vulnerable students. So our concentration level right now is helping those students. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Sarah.
So these care funding dollars that you'll targeted, so will we you identify those with us, are those care dollars? So that it says care dollars, the care funding dollars will be targeted to identify support. So then we'll get that information of how we're going to spend that money.
So the CARES dollars that we got up to this point was very limited on what we could spend it on. We spent it on technology, we spent it on a lot of PPE, and this one opens up the door. And Scott, if you have more information on this or thoughts that I'm not sharing, please pipe in. But I was excited to see that it opens up. So imagine, and in the language, it even said, it likened it to our Title I dollars. So the Title I programs can then be extended, and we can really, it's not Title I, but it's dollars that we can spend on similar programs to close some of those gaps. And that would be through personnel, programs, and resources. Anything to add to that, Scott?
No, not really. I mean, they've tried to make these dollars as flexible as possible. Actually, with this next round, they're actually including some additional things that could be added. Prime example is HVAC systems in buildings. For the most part, that's not going to affect us. Our HVAC systems are all relatively new and have been well maintained. But you know, that's something that we're obviously going to evaluate. What all we can spend the dollars on. We know that we can spend it on technology, you know, anything to improve or allow for distance learning, anything to be done in the buildings to try to bring the kids back on in are all viable expenses for the CARES or ESSER money. So we're kind of waiting. Like I said, numbers just got released yesterday, which I think I sent all the board members exactly how much we were going to be getting. We have until, I believe, December, at the end of December of 2022 to spend these dollars. We want to spend them wisely, but also, you know, now is the time to really start planning for either summer or whatever we plan on doing with those dollars and put together a strategic plan. So I think that that's a conversation that I'll be having with Mr. Baird. Mr. Thomas Lish Brown has been greatly involved in that. Erica can be involved in that. Obviously, Jared will be involved for any additional technology purchases, additional Chromebooks, those type of things. So we're going to make sure that we utilize those dollars to the best of our ability. But there are some caveats that we have to make sure that what all we're spending on, we just can't go on out and just spend it carte blanche.
Mrs. Chapman. Mrs. Chapman who's joined. Mrs. Chapman, do you have anything to add?
We're just excited to get kids back in the building as soon as possible. Students are doing a pretty good job when you look at our semester GPAs over a number of years and you look at where we are this semester. Students have performed similarly to as they have in the past years. And I think that's a credit to our teachers for being flexible with getting things handed in and understanding some technology glitches that students have had and just trying to cut back some of the things we typically do to make sure we're hitting those power standards and showing evidence of that. So I think our students have done really well despite being hybrid, but I know the kids really want to be at school full time. So as soon as we can get back full time, I know the students would appreciate that. I do understand the balance of high school athletics and the value of that. I really do understand that and not wanting to lose a season. So it's a difficult balance and a difficult decision. I totally understand that. But as soon as we could get kids back academically, I think that would serve our students well. And I know they're just hungry to get back in school.
And Mrs. Chapman referenced a comparison of grade points, and I shared that with the board. That report is sitting on your desk. So with that, I think what the board needs to look at is the plan of return coupled with the new guidance, although the new guidance, the impact is some, but it's not everything. And you heard Dr. Orsina, he is cautious about being above grade 5, going back. And I've had the discussion with Dr. Orsina, And I've had that discussion with the Board of Education. And the caution lies in exactly what we've talked about. Could it lead to pulling back sooner or pulling back further than what we want to do? And is that balance worth it? We watch the numbers very close. We did not have a case of student positivity for 2 weeks until today, I think, or yesterday. The staff positivity right now is at 3. Okay, so the case count is fairly low here. I think Dr. Orsina brought up a good point about even sometimes physicians give guidance. Oh, you got it in your household, you don't need to get the testing, or you've got the symptoms, don't get tested. I mean, the health department needs to know where it is so they know those contacts so it doesn't spread to that vulnerable population. So it's very important when you have that. And I will get into the testing and the vaccinations. I'll touch on that a little bit after we make a decision on this.
Well, I think the motion that, not necessarily that we
Shelley, you
accepted-
just muted.
Oh, sorry. I make a motion that we review this as a board, his proposal, and with any further discussion.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve as presented by Mr. Baird, new learning level, February 1st through February 26th, K through 8, 4 days a week, with Wednesday as a cleaning / remote day. Yep, high school will remain hybrid, February 1st through February 26th, and will be reviewed again on the board meeting February 21st, I believe. 22nd. Do I have a motion?
No, second.
Okay, Mrs. Whiting, second. Thank you. Any further discussion?
If we could, I would just like to confirm, when you made your motion, you said to review.
Well, like if there was any other discussion, I wanted to make sure that if there was any discussion left, that it was that was given.
So you can make a motion to accept,
Except,
and then there's a second, and then you can discuss it.
Right.
Okay, great.
So just to review, we have a motion to accept the new learning level plan as presented by Mr. Baird, February 1st through February 26th, K through 8, 4 days a week, and the high school will remain hybrid. Mrs. Whiting, second. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Muniak, call the roll, please.
Mr. Davis.
Sorry, go ahead again.
Go ahead.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Thank you, sorry. Mr. DeCamp.
Yes.
Mrs. Barrett. Mr. Staley.
Yes.
Mrs. Whiting.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item 19, COVID reduction exercise update.
So I also included in your notes last night, and I put it on your desk. It looks like sideways.
Yeah.
I put on your desk the exercise that we went through to save the dollars. Scott has a few words to say about that. Scott, if you could share, going down through the list: professional development, staffing, no travel, painting services, limit all field trips, supplemental, first shift custodial absence, technology, drastically reduce subscriptions and vendor supports, eliminate extra POs, athletics, and we were looking at a total savings of $309,000 when we did the exercise about. So Scott, updates on that?
Yes, just a couple things regarding that and looking at it. We we have been very successful in that we haven't had any outside professional development. We have, so that saved us both in travel, registration fees, sub costs associated with professional development. Sorry, I got multiple screens going here. However, on the flip side, one thing that we were going to try to do was do more NU University. To date, we haven't had very many NU University sessions. I know that some recently just got scheduled, so we also haven't had the expenses of the NU University. We have eliminated all the NU University prizes, snacks, everything like that. So that has saved us a significant amount of money. There has been a little bit of travel from staff. That is something that is actually in the negotiated agreement. However, it's been very, very limited. Mainly travel actually in between buildings. The supplemental, they're listed at $25,000. Obviously, we moved forward with supplementals, so that ended up not being any kind of a savings. Mr. Jeff Miller has been covering any first shift custodians that have been on out. So that's a savings there for sub costs. We had moved a lot of our technology purchases to ESSER funds. So that was a reduction into the general fund. I know that we went on through, I believe Erica and Rich and Jared all went through to look at what were some of these Schoology, those type of things, some of our online platforms, whether or not we really needed those or those were being utilized to the great extent. And I think a couple got eliminated. Mrs. Allison has done an excellent job of eliminating extra POs. I know that was a past practice at the elementary school was every teacher got at least $150, which they were able to just go on out and spend on whatever they wanted in their classroom. She has eliminated those. The other building principals have also done a very good job. Because of the change in our fiscal software, we are no longer at this time doing the purchase orders where they're getting put on at the buildings. They're now being all sent on up to the board office. And I'm very happy. It's actually reduced my load that very few purchase orders are actually coming on up. So I really appreciate the efforts on the parts of the building principals to reduce those additional costs. As far as athletics, that would be a question more for Mr. Hajar. But, you know, I think that was his goal was to overall reduce expenditures at every level. However, I do have to say on the flip side, we do have some increased costs. And that all stems to the other part of the CARES Act, which was the 10 basically COVID days, for lack of better word, which they have since expired. Those expired on December 31st, 2020. But what all the COVID days were basically, if you were quarantined, if you were had you know been contracted the virus, you essentially were given 10 sick days. So that was in no charge to the employee as far as their sick leave or anything like that. So obviously and then the other problem is with the flu, you know, if you were out for maybe 3-4 days, a typical year of flu. Now you're out for at least 10 to 14 days. So you have the additional of subs and everything like that. So that's what I mean. On the flip side, even though our expenses were down over here in professional development, our costs of sick leave have actually gone up. So that's the flip side. So I think that we have done a good job of really trying to watch the dollars. And you know the main thing that obviously we all know funding or not funding personnel is our greatest cost. So that's the thing that we always have to watch the most. As far as funding side, it's crazy. You know, we got $180,000 from Bureau of Workers' Comp, and that was on top of additional rebates. You know, those are things that they're once in probably my lifetime that I'm going to see those kind of rebates. So as far as revenue side, we're like all over the map. You know, we're still down a little bit as far as state funding, but then I just saw an email today that said Governor DeWine just signed an executive order that he's going to actually return some of the money that had been previously reduced. Because if you look at state revenues, they're actually up about $500 million over what all they originally anticipated. And then with the continued support for unemployment is taxable at the school district level. So we are still receiving those additional dollars. So, it's just a matter of trying to watch everything that's coming on and then knowing that this is not a typical year and that I have to back certain things on out as we move forward in our 5-year forecast.
Thank you, Mr. Maruniak. So one thing that personally, as I analyze the budget now and moving forward, look at our cost savings, what I'd like for the board to discuss and think about, and you and Mr. Baird and the principals as well, as we look at this. So what are some things on this that we can do without, right, moving forward? And then I'd like to have a discussion, or maybe you guys can work on this moving forward. Start building some of these back into our budget, I guess, like the POs, athletics, supplementals, things that a normal year. Our teachers deserve the POs. We need to have professional development, traveling, as you go to travel to your, professional developments and work, as you and Mr. Maruniak do things. I think we need to have that discussion as a board, building these things back in. So that's something that I'd like for us to, I guess, look at moving forward is what can we do without, but also what do we need to build back into our budget moving forward. So
if I could make a comment on the professional development. So we have saved quite a bit in the professional development area because we didn't do outside. And sometimes it's good to reset that and get, caught up on what we are supposed to learn. And if you remember, the board gave us 12 days at the beginning of the year to do a very advanced professional development online. And our teachers some of them are still completing that throughout the year. We basically set up so many hours and they could get in. And it's one of those things where you could spend just the hour on it, but it's so involved and so good, you could spend 15 hours on it, So they have been finishing that up. And as they finish that up, that's when we have just opened in university back up for them to do more. And it's really a teacher-paced program, and they can go as deep as they want. They might pick something and say, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm ready for that in my classroom yet. Or they might say, I've been waiting to do this for 10 years. I'm going to dive in deep. And our coaches and our chief academic officer, our principals have done a fantastic job of having those discussions within their buildings. What are the needs? And they're going to be moving forward with more professional development still within. But at some point, like you said, next year, we will have to start looking at going outside and getting those ideas again.
is the board okay with that? Any discussion on building some of these, I don't want to call them expenses. To me, it's an investment. It's an investment in our kids. It's an investment in our staff. It's an investment in our school. So is the board okay with that analysis? I guess seeing some things built back into our budget now since we've cut them for a year, and maybe building some things back in. What's efficient? What's not efficient? Maybe like Schoology, I see use Google, that's free. Is that something? Do we learn something there that we don't need Schoology, for example, or some things that we can do without? So, so that's something they can analyze as a building administrators and kind of give us an analysis of what they can do with and without. So.
Well, it strikes me that this has been, for all of the negatives, an opportunity to learn some things about how, I guess, school management, how the physical plant is managed perhaps better, how teacher professional development can be done at maybe a more cost-effective basis. So I think that's an excellent idea. And maybe just on the plus side, I'm saying just in education in general, probably most schools are learning an awful lot about themselves and have some positives they can build on. So I agree.
Okay.
To me, Brian, I think we talk about making it normal for the kids. I think it's important to make it for staff and teachers as well, too. So.
Scott, I do have a question. So when we met and we started discussing this of cutting these costs, you'd made a comment about robotics. So how have they been doing?
Robotics, from what I've seen, unfortunately, I don't think that they've attended very many events. So, that's really where the main cost comes about, is the registration fees, transportation, those type of things for the robotic events. I have not seen very many registrations come across my desk. I put on all invoices, so it's definitely not like it had been in the past. But it's, I think, just the nature of the COVID environment, and that not very many events are actually being held. So, maybe we're learning something there also, in that, maybe we're taking more time to really get prepared for those events that we're going to, or something like that. That would be a question for the coaches.
And I will tell you, Shelley, I have had discussions with Christy at length about finding the financial independence, number one, and number two, have that great experience of robotics with our kids without necessarily taking them all every weekend, because that becomes draining on the advisor. And what I told Christy, I said, sustainability is very important. And we had great discussions about that. And I will say that we hosted the first VEX event this year here in our building, and they are traveling to Brecksville today to an event. So it is continuing. They are practicing, they are getting together, and they are following all the safety protocols required. So I'm very proud of that's able to continue. So.
All right, moving. Anything else you want to add to that section, Mr. Baird? Okay, thank you. Lessons learned in 2020, 1C.
Lessons learned. I think, Mr. DeCamp, you asked this, and sometimes you do have a time to take a breath and look about it and have these discussions. I think we have to have a more hardened discussion with staff and students and administrators about what we've learned. But I will tell you, on the surface, and I could talk all day about this, but I won't. We have a strategic plan that we put together. And I want you to think back on how we built that strategic plan. And at that moment, COVID-19 wasn't anywhere on the radar, okay? And we put together 4 strategies: wellness, communication and marketing, programming, and community engagement. And if you think about, and we put that everywhere. That is on our letterheads, that's on our buildings, that's in our thoughts, that's in our meetings. Everywhere we talk about that. And all through this, for example, if you look at wellness, the person who sat in this room with us and helped put the strategic plan together is our direct connection to the Ohio Department of Health. So he understands our district. He understands the needs of our district. And more than anything, he trusts our district. Okay, so that, just knowing that wellness was on our radar and feeling like it's important enough to bring the health department on board for our strategic plan was huge. So it's more of an affirmation than a lesson learned, but as far as wellness goes, and we saw how important it is. I think Shelley has brought up at every single meeting, how are we going to continue to talk about wellness? On the social emotional side, you guys remember the meeting last year in March. We did the signs of suicide and we saw what we were dealing with. We have been working all year to make sure that continues and expands. So wellness, we know what we're doing is important. We're glad we had the foundation coming in. We learned a lot more, a lot quicker than what we thought we would, but we did it. As far as communication and marketing goes, you guys remember Governor DeWine almost a year ago saying we're going on an extended spring break. Nobody knew what that meant. Nobody knew what that was. All we knew was we're going to be away from our kids for, at least 3 weeks, okay? We made personal contact every single day through our call system with the students. And the thought wasn't to give them information or fill them with information. The thought was, hey, we're still here. Don't forget about us. You're coming back here. And as it turned out, they didn't come back to us until September. But we made that connection and we kept talking to them. We did it through food. So communication and marketing was huge. And programming. So education, if you walk into a classroom in 1890 and you walk into a classroom a year ago, there are fancier things, shinier things, neater things, but it's not that much different, okay? But now we have a whole new platform of education. And that platform has been there for quite a while, but we've learned actually how to use that platform and get better at that platform. We also learned it's not the ideal platform. We also learned that in-person learning is still very, very important. And this is just a tool. And will it give us opportunities in the future? Absolutely. We've had lots of discussions about some of the great things our high school kids are doing outside. And that's part of the consideration that they stay in the high. Some of the great things they're doing outside of school through working, through activities, through athletics, they're really able to expand on some of the things they really love to do. And maybe we need to allow them to do that more in the future. So in programming, and we also learned a lot about professional development, how fast we can develop it and get it out there. So on the programming side, and then the community engagement, I will reinforce our relationship already with Ohio Department of Health before we got into this. And he was the first phone call I made when I heard we were on an extended spring break. Jason, what does this mean? Because I just talked to him the previous week about what this was about. And he was able to explain it to me in terms I understood. We also have that partnership with the Mental Health and Recovery Board. They have been an extremely important partner in this, and they need to continue to be a partner. Our Union County EMA, I would talk to Brad 3, 4, 5 times a year. Okay, now I talk to him every week, and they are a support system in place for us. So community, and I cannot wait till I can start going to the township meetings again. I was able to go to township meetings before COVID and go visit. I already have those connections with all the townships. Anything I need, they know I'm there. I know they're there for the support. So lessons learned overall is I'm glad we had a great strategic plan in place. I think there are things that we can expand on that we've learned from this. And there are things that we confirmed aren't so great, but we've got to continue to maintain that balance. Later on in the discussion, we'll talk about the future of the digital academy. And that was a need that I saw a year ago. We had to really increase doing that, but that might be something that takes us into the future. So hopefully that covers the lessons learned.
Any discussion? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Baird.
And then the PPE and supply update. So as you know, we spent a lot of money of our initial funds on PPE and supply. And after the meeting, you can go up and look. We've got an outstanding supply of cleaning cloths, PPE, everything that you can imagine we have for us. I'm fully confident we can go the rest of the year with all the supplies we need. Brad Gilbert at EMA, if we run out, he says we got more. So we're in good shape with that. Very confident in that. Questions about that? And then the connectivity update. So connectivity issues hang around 10 to 15% of our student population in the end. We were able to acquire through CARES funding 100 Verizon hotspot units. And if they didn't get good connectivity at home, or if the teachers recognized they weren't getting good connectivity, the suggestion was made to come up here, sign one out, they take it home, and they use it at no cost to the student. At this point, we haven't had anybody come in and say this isn't working. It's working, and we still have probably 40 units left. So the connectivity is good right now, as far as what we're used to. That's another thing, lessons learned. How good is your broadband at home? I learned mine's not that great. I got to pay a little bit more to get a little bit better. But that is another thing that we look at. So any other questions about that?
All right, thank you, Mr. Baird. Wellness done. Item 4.2, communication and marketing website update. I know this is Mrs. Eric, and we've kind of discussed some things on kind of getting everything in line with our strategic plan,
So-
everything, our new labeling and branding and everything like.
So I'm glad, it was interesting that I saw that as an item, and Jared, at the same time, without knowing that was an item, said, we just got our website draft in, and it's time for us to take a look at it. So I'm going to share that with you right now. Hopefully I do not mess this up. A tab. And I'm going to share that one. Share. Tell me if you can see it. Yeah. So you can see the website. So what they did was, is that good? Yep. So that's the top of our website, and you can see the focus on the students initially. And Jared is on there. So Jared, can you talk for a minute just about the process of website development? Because you know you don't want me talking about that.
So we obviously hire or contract this out as just about all schools do, and so this is eSchool View. They're located in Columbus, and they come up with a design. They provide the content management system for us to go in and make the editing, and so this is their new design of the homepage. That's really all you're gonna be able to see. You can scroll down through that. There's just those 5 major links at the top. You can see our new branding. It's really clean, really, there's just not a lot of clutter like we had before. So that's the direction websites are heading. And so that's where we wanted to go as well. And so at this point, I worked with them this week to make some tweaks to that final revision. And so this is probably what the homepage is going to look like. And at this point, I'll just be working on reorganizing everything into those 5 major links at the top and making some updates to some information that's outdated. So the rest of the pages will kind of flow with this design that you can't really see when you click on the link yet, but this is what we'll be looking at.
The percent for 21st, we did away with that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll go away.
That'll go away. Yep. Hey, Jared, is there a timeline that they've shared with you as far as how or what it looks like as far as building this out?
At this point, and just to backtrack a little bit, they have swamped. I mean, it's not like we just started working on this. This company has been hit hard as anybody during COVID, just because their job is communication, whether it's the messaging system that we use, the student registration, and all the forms that have changed, and the COVID forms that are required, and the websites and the communication. So everybody's doing the same thing we are, requesting changes to all those platforms. And so, they have been swamped, and so now it's more, a little bit more my timeline. I still have to rely on them to do the final switch, but it's now, I would say, I hope, kind of that spring break or when we return full time, that same kind of area, I think, as far as me finishing out the reorganization and making that flip. I'll be having a communication with them actually this week to decide on a final date, because they have to be part of that process. And one other thing I'll add real quick is it is the platform is made to change of screen size. So if you were to pull this up on your cell phone, it's going to adapt. It should. Our old site did that, but it was not pretty. So depending on whether you're on a large screen, laptop, tablet, phone, it will adapt to work with whatever screen size we're working. So it is mobile friendly.
Jared, one question I have, is this website going to be compatible? Everybody's on their phones, right? Everybody does everything on their phone. So, I mean, are we at the point as a district where we are basically zero paper going home to our parents? So if a parent needs to pay school fees, sign up for the ACT all the way down to K through, kindergartners signing up whatever, I don't mean, whatever they're doing at the elementary, can we be zero paper to where everything is on our website? All they gotta do is click on a link and they're signing these forms, online, everything's signature ready. Everything I do in my world, everybody has the ability to sign things, online now. Are we at that point where people can just get on their phones and sign their forms and pay their fees and make changes if they want to sign up for what's the calls we get, Mr. Baird, that you sign up 2-hour delay call? What are those called? What's that system called?
Call.
One call. If somebody doesn't get a one call, can they click a link on our website and sign up for the one call to make sure they're getting those notifications? Is our website a one-stop shop for everything that we need as a district? I think that's the most important thing as we're investing this money in our website. Do we have the ability for our website to do that?
Yeah, most of those platforms are hosted, somewhere else. We use Pay Schools to make payments for fees and lunches, and so they're going to Pay Schools website. So that parent link that's at the top, the very first link on the new website, it's going to say parents. Those are all going to fall underneath that drop-down menu. They'll click on Pay Schools to make fees and lunch payments. We've made great strides in the last year or two as far as forms and registration. So I would say a lot of our parents are doing student registration online on their phones, I believe, because a lot of people don't have a computer at home. And I haven't heard any complaints about that. And this past year, we've added all the athletic forms online that we can, that don't require some kind of doctor signature, for instance. And as far as I know, you'd have to ask Mr. Hadro, but as far as I know, that's working out well. So we've definitely eliminated a lot of paperwork as far as registration goes. There are some, Instant Connect is the phone calls. It's not a perfect solution as far as signing up, but I think I don't think we make a lot of changes to that. So off the top of my head, I guess I don't know of anything that people are having to call in or fill out physical paperwork, at least on the district level, that can't be done on the website.
I will say that my job at the parent orientations that we have at the beginning of the year typically is to, and you're going to wonder why it's my job, but I go in and help in the labs. People get logged on and fill out their forms because they don't have computers at home. So it's always going to exist that we have, or at least in the near future, it's going to exist that the parents and grandparents have that ability to sign and do things. It's kind of like the ball games. There's some people, we're using the digital system exclusively this year, and some of the poor folks come in and say, I had to go to my daughter's house, and they unfold it, and they say, this is what you gave me, or whatever. So you understand that it's not always going to be exclusively, and there are systems available. They try to sell me the systems all the time. The Instant Connect and One Call system is a good system. I can get through it. It sends it out. It's probably 1/10 the cost of the best system you can get. And what does that give you? It might give you, so I can say something or do something and it goes to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever platforms are instantly. It's just much more expensive to do it that way. So, and as a district, we might get there at some point. And I will say that at the building level, again, lesson learned, I think the Facebook accounts were enhanced and used, and I know they use that at the building level quite a bit. So we appreciate that as well.
Any further discussion or questions? Yep, go ahead, Mr. Camp.
Jared, I really like the look of the website. I think it's very clean, very polished. I like the layout. The only thing I wanted to suggest was that at the top of the screen where it had the gray kind of bar across the top at the very top, the next drop downs that you have with the white font, at least with that background on my screen, it was hard to see the different options. So I just wanted to mention that to you.
Yeah, I agree. It's really going to depend on whatever photo we have up there, and when they change it to the students in the nursing program, it can kind of get washed out there. Now, when you do highlight over top of those, the block changes to orange. They're very visible, but I agree they're kind of hidden depending on the picture, and also that's going to change with screen size. And I'm not sure what size showed up on yours there, but as soon as you put it on a different screen, whether it's your laptop or tablet, that picture is going to move as well. So I'll take a look at that again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans, for your time and all your work on the website. I know that's a never-ending project, so thank you very much. 4.3 programming, 3A course handbook update, high school and middle school.
So this came up, I think, Gene, you suggested this discussion item, and I talked to you a little bit about this last night where we talked about electives. I also shared with you the document from Mrs. Chapman that includes the semester A GPA grade comparison, and you can kind of see the steps that they take in order to create electives. You could specifically talk about what the concerns are, and then maybe we can discuss that a little bit.
I had talked to Rich, just some thoughts. I'm curious because it's kind of hard now not having a child in school and not working in the building. It's kind of hard for me to be able to tell, but it looks like there aren't many opportunities for electives. And we seem to, it strikes me that we don't have electives. I'm going to sound like an old fogey, but the kind of electives that kids seem to really have fun with, maybe someone who is interested in going right into college, but they wanted to take industrial arts. It seems like we have kids focused on a construction pathway, but then anyone else that might think it was fun to take what we used to call shop. And I had spoken to Rich about that. I had a grandchild that I mentioned to you with Kurt Gruner, how much he had enjoyed every single class he took. His pathway, though, was the ag pathway. And I know they're kind of related, but what if he just wanted to take a couple of Kurt's classes and was in, I don't know, maybe the nursing pathway? So I'm curious how we can facilitate that for kids, make it easier for them to take something that's maybe out of their comfort zone, but they're interested in, and then also availability. And I know we're a small school district and we can't have a ton of offerings, but maybe some offerings and something every other year you could take a shop class or industrial arts or whatever it's called today. So that was what I was talking to Rich about. And I don't want to, I would hate to see us, any high school, I think, get to the point where kids are only focused very narrowly on one path. And this is a time of exploration. What do I want to major in? What do I want to study? What am I going to do with the rest of my life?
And the pathways since their development have been very fluid. And we have some kids, I'm going to guess that they're in 4 or 5, I mean, they're taking classes from 4 or 5 different pathways at once. Like they might be taking ag, construction, engineering, you know, a class here I see as one of our major obstacles is some of our older students are able to, past practice has been, they only take 3 or 4 classes and then they go home. And that takes away electives.
Yes, it does.
It takes away electives. I think that's something to consider. But I will let Mrs. Chapman address some of that. With in mind, every year they have discussions about what the electives are, both through student interest and teacher interest, and who's going to teach what. So I'll let Janelle expand on that a little bit.
So this is really perfect timing that you're asking this question, because the past 2 days I met with all the teachers at the high school to talk about planning for next school year. And I always ask them, you know, how is your schedule working for you? What classes do you want to teach? Sometimes we have teachers say, like in a whole department, they may want to switch up and say, well, I want to teach that, and somebody else is going to pick something else up, you know, because teachers want to keep it fresh too and not teach maybe the same thing or the same grade level all the time. And so, so I have talked to every teacher and asked them, what do you want to do? And the teachers came out with, and I put a list on that document that Rich shared with you, like maybe offering an AP Physics every other year, opposite of AP Chem for some students. Our choir has not been able to sing as a group because of all the COVID restrictions. And we imagine like maybe with this other strain coming through, will that continue into next school year? So we were thinking maybe bringing in a music appreciation course because students expressed some interest maybe in doing that as well. We're thinking of bringing in an ACT prep course that would be a semester long, where we would try to have like an English teacher available and a science math teacher available so that the kids could go between those two teachers, you know, because if I'm an English teacher, I really don't want to be prepping you for ACT math, you know, so trying to get them with the content experts to work with them on prep for the ACT, and that would be a semester long elective. And I put a link, I will share this document with you in the Google Doc form, the digital form, because I put some hyperlinks in there where you could click on the blue writing and it will take you to some examples. But there's a program like On to College that we could use for our ACT prep, where our teachers are working them through time tests, practice tests, tips and tricks on how to take the ACT, having students engage in actual practice tests where they get feedback on how they've done to prepare them for the ACT. That would be a huge cost savings to our parents, because to have to go buy that for your child, you're talking hundreds of dollars. So we're gonna be able to offer that in our school. And 2 years ago, I started an ACT data team to start looking at ACT and looking at bringing in some more ACT assessments into the high school. And so we've kind of we are shifting our culture from looking at the end of course exams, the state tests, because students are only accountable now for 2 state tests instead of 7 to graduate. And we've been moving our focus over to ACT. So this data team, that's kind of how this course came out of this data team. So as you were asking last board meeting about ACT, I was actually pretty excited because we've already made that kind of culture shift in the high school to start looking at ACT and preparing kids better and bringing in this course. So some staff said, hey, I might like to teach astronomy. I want to do an ACT class. So that's one piece. The other piece is students are going to get a survey on Monday, and I'm asking them, what kind of courses would you like to see at the high school? What are your interests that maybe we aren't offering right now? I'm also going to do a check-in of their mental health. You know, how are you feeling mental health wise? Would you like to speak to Mrs. Patterson? And then also I want to ask them about academics again. Do you feel like the work is manageable? Do you know where to find what you need? Are your teachers responding to you when you reach out to them? So each semester I've kind of done this survey, and like one of those things they're going to share with me is, what courses are you interested in? Even though we took the industrial arts class and turned it into a pathway, we have always maintained semester-long electives in industrial tech, so that students never had to be a part of the construction pathway. That was only 2 periods a day of Kurt's schedule. The rest of the time he was teaching industrial tech 1 and 2, where students could just take semester-long courses in industrial tech. Our nursing pathway, we offer a semester elective, which is just intro to healthcare professions. So students don't have to be in the nursing pathway to just test it out and take a semester-long class just to see if they even like that. I think that's something we could do with ag also. I know Breck asked to bring in a food science course, which is like phenomenal. I think our kids will love it. So she's bringing that in, but maybe we could even offer like an ag elective semester-long course where students could just say, I want to experience ag. You know, both teachers have an extra period in their schedule where they're doing some other things that I could release them from, to where if kids wanted kind of that sample course but not have to commit to a year-long course, that is something we could totally offer them. And I hope I'm not doing cart before the horse here, but we may have a retirement in the construction program. So what becomes of that pathway is uncertain at the moment. There is some overlap with ag as far as students, you know, they're building sawhorses, they're learning some welding. So Mr. Jolliffe is very astute with all those skills. And so students do get some of those industrial tech skills within his ag class. So there is some crossover of content. Finding an industrial tech teacher is tough because there aren't very many people walking around with that license anymore. To bring in somebody from the construction world to come into our high school to teach construction is difficult because they would likely take a pay cut to be a teacher. And then I would have to send them to school and get 24 hours of graduate credit to get licensed to teach that program. And I know that even career centers have trouble getting like those engineering and construction teachers to come in because they really do take a pay cut. And then we say, take a pay cut and then go get all these graduate credit. It's hard. And I will say that Mr. Gruner, it's been phenomenal. And we've sent a kid onto a graduate last year onto the Carpenters Union, and he's just doing great there. I don't want to lose the program. I know it's going to be hard to replace it. And Tri-Rivers may have the best construction program, I would say, in the country. If you know that teacher and he's a North Union graduate, he is phenomenal. If I could clone that man, I would. So we have a number of our students who are going to do the construction program at Tri-Rivers. And if you haven't seen it, you should check it out because I would put it up against any program really in the country. It's phenomenal. So our students will still have that opportunity.
Janelle, could, and I don't even know if they do this anymore, but could another teacher teach CAD, computer design? I wouldn't have to be an industrial tech teacher, but couldn't someone with the computer licensure do it?
So one hole that we have right now is engineering. So Mr. Gruner taught the first engineering course in the pathway, and then we had a former teacher, math teacher, who was career tech licensed to teach the rest of the engineering courses. Well, that teacher left 2 years ago to take a job in a district closer to her house, and now potentially we're losing Mr. Gruner. So there goes our engineering pathway. So Jesse Miller, who is our Algebra 2 teacher, he is so like-minded for engineering. Like, he loves project-based learning and making math real world. So he stepped forward and said, I'd be interested in doing this. Well, what we found out is if he gets the Project Lead the Way training, which is the curriculum that we use, and he has a math license, he does not have to go do the 24 hours of graduate credit to get the career tech license, which is great because by having a licensed career tech teacher, we get funding from the state, which is really important. And then we can send kids out on internships because we have a career tech licensed program. So Jesse would very much love, he is passionate. If you hear him talk, he just gets you excited about it. He is passionate about being the engineering pathway teacher. So in the number of VEX kids that we have, I think it's really important that we do offer an engineering program. I would say year over year, we have 5 to 10 kids that we graduate who go on into engineering. 2 years ago, we had an exceptional class. We had 18 students leave and go into engineering schools. So I think it's important that we offer that. And there's also the opportunity to align with Tri-Rivers, which I really love, that we could start in the middle school with the GTT class and create this pathway where students could stay at North Union for 4 years if they want to do that engineering program, or they could, do maybe the first 2 engineering programs that we have at North Union, and then go over to the Tri-Rivers Ram Tech program, where again, if you haven't seen it, it is phenomenal, the credentialing and everything these kids get. And so students would have the ability to do the Tri-Rivers program. So we met with Tri-Rivers last week, and we're working on, like, if we bring in engineering at the high school, having this alignment where students could, if you want more the traditional 4-year degree in engineering, you could finish your program out all 4 years at North Union. And if you want to do more of the robotics technician degree, then you would start with us and then pathway right into Tri-Rivers. So it's expanding opportunity for students this way. And if you talk to our manufacturers in Union County, they cannot get enough of these robotics technician type level people. And we have kids who are so mechanical in their thinking. They may not love algebra and how we teach math, but they are the kids who will take your lawnmower apart and put it back together. And they are not getting into Tribe Rivers. That Ramtech program there should be full, and it's not. And so I really want to work with manufacturers in Tribe Rivers to get more kids involved, because there are jobs sitting out there in Union County that pay really well, that we have kids well suited for, but they're not in these careers. So that's kind of what we're thinking. If we could move Jesse Miller into the engineering program, then we could build up our engineering program. We could push a couple other courses out through our ag program that could be sampling elective classes that kids may really enjoy, maybe have some of that woodworking flavor in there also, if we can't fill construction.
Thank you.
Janelle, I have a couple questions. So one of the things that I found interesting was last week when we had our last couple weeks ago when we had our conversation with G, and G made a comment, was about the literature part and about difficult readings and getting the kids adjusted, you know, to that type of testing at that level. And I know for myself, and my son was also the same way, that it is intimidating. And I think that her, you know, when she made that comment, I thought that hit home with me and my personal family. So, you know, like, I'm just wondering like what we could do to help that, you know, like help that in that area also.
Yeah, so that was going to be a focus, and then COVID hit. So we were working with teachers on like student engagement strategies, and one of them is just teaching disciplinary literacy. And Erica actually found like this great resource for us to use where you're teaching literacy across all subjects. And one thing that we find that students struggle with, when you get to high school, the vocabulary, the content specific vocabulary just skyrockets. And students are dealing, you know, with words like mitochondria and photosynthesis and, you know, these big technical words that are specific to the content area. And so if students, they may know what that word means, and they might even be able to tell you, you know, how it works and functions and everything, but the vocabulary itself is a stumbling block to them. So Erica and I and my building leadership team were just about to launch into how do we teach literacy across the curriculum, you know, things as simple as building these word walls and maps that are next to the board that have the word has a picture of whatever that is, you know, that you know, if it's mitochondria, kind of a picture, and label it with where that is within the cell, and then a definition. And so students kind of have this chart in front of them that if they're struggling with the word, they have a visual representation and they have the definition. Something as simple as that can help students access that content specific vocabulary. And also Erica, and she can speak to this because she is more of an expert in this than I am, just about teaching students the root words and origins of words, where they can deconstruct the words across all this different curriculum. So that, like, we were just like the launch was about to start when COVID hit, and then we really had to back off a little bit and let teachers just figure out how to do digital learning. But Erica, do you want to talk a minute about that? Because she's a little more expert on that than me.
Well, Janelle, I think you did a great job of that. We were doing a lot of I'm proud of the work that we have done because it's the right thing to do. And it just so happens that it's prepared us so well for everything that we've been dealing with. So as Janelle said, there's a push. If you look at Ohio's literacy plan, there's a push for disciplinary literacy. And it goes deeper. It teaches kids how to read like a scientist or how to read like a mathematician. So if I'm attacking, you know, in research writing, if I'm attacking a large piece of research, I don't start at the beginning typically, except for the abstract. And then I'm going to go to the end and figure out what happened, the conclusion. Then I'm going to work my way back through it. So those are skills, you know, if I'm reading in a science textbook, it's very different than if I'm picking up some Nathaniel Hawthorne or something. It's very different. And as we reached out and Janelle did a great job of this in our staff meetings, is saying, okay, where do you want to work at the high school? And we were quite pleased to see that across the board, they wanted to work on vocabulary. So we demonstrated all these different things. They chose vocabulary. And there is research after research that shows increasing vocabulary helps not only ACT scores, but think about the CTE programs that we're doing and the technical pieces that they're doing. When they go out there and have to put something together and read about it, that is hard reading. It's difficult reading, but there's interest in it. So, I can't break down photosynthesis. I can't teach you a different word for it. You have to understand it as a process. So when we teach kids photo means light and synthesis means the breaking down of it, it's really easy to understand other things that go through in there. So we talk about a photograph. Well, why is a photograph called a photograph? Light, and then it's write or draw. What does a photograph do? So you can see how just this tiny little bit of explicit instruction on this academic vocabulary has great reward overall. So I won't get too technical because I get really excited about this. But as Janelle said, we had the logistics, and that's across all of the buildings. We had to kind of put a pause on everything else to get the logistics. God bless our administrators putting together PPE and getting these the plastic set up, all of that work that they did just so we could do anything else. But we're looking more at job embedded. How do we take the PD? Because one of the beautiful things about in university is that we can keep pushing things out. One of the difficult things in university is it's only the people that come. And so we're really shifting in university to be blended, so we can do a little bit of both, but also remote, because that allows our people that have children or are coaching or whatever going on. So that takes more time to build. And then also not forgetting the face-to-face piece. Our people were excited, and then we're taking this work. I'm proud of the instructional team that we're saying, okay, we're all focused on this. What we do every day when we're working with teachers, focus on that work. So disciplinary literacy is still in the literacy plan. It's just been put briefly on pause and going to be pushed forward more openly, I should say. There's work being done on it here and there, but more openly for next year.
I just have one more question then. During the holiday season, I had an experience, and I was around some high school kids, and I had wrote some things out in cursive, and these kids could not read it. I had to read it to them. So what are we doing to help these? Are we doing anything to help our kids at North Union to know how to read it and write it?
Shelley, we do still teach cursive at the elementary level. We begin to introduce it a little bit in second, but really dig in third. So we have not given that up. I'm a big proponent of cursive writing myself and neat cursive writing. In fact, one of the things that we've actually talked about is the proper, I attended a PD last year, actually with Jen Davis, on how that writing, a proper writing, I'm talking about formation, whether it be printed, cursive, how then it feeds into, I can't write, because if I'm back, they had us do a sample, take and write, I believe it was like 3 sentences, something like that, and write every word backwards, or I'm sorry, every letter backwards. And how long it took us. That's how it is for the child. So I think we have to start to teach them properly, form the letters, properly teach the writing. And then I think that's where it feeds into the middle school and high school is, because if they can't, believe it or not, it all goes together. If I can't form the letters, then I can't write, because I'm still thinking about how I'm going to form that letter, and I can't write about the subject. So we all got to work together on that, if that makes sense.
I would say as well, in society, where are you going to see cursive writing? It's in a letter that somebody sent you. It's in your name. And what's the exposure to that? We talked earlier about, paperless communication. So where are the kids seeing that? It's not in their books, it's not on their phones, it's not on their computer. So that continuing that exposure is where that would come from. And we definitely give them that exposure in those early years. But having the materials available to just show them cursive writing just isn't there. I mean, unless mom or dad writes something to them in cursive, which they struggle with that too now. So, yeah.
Well, I just see it as a literacy tool, and I see it as a cognitive learning. I mean, with me, I have to write it and read it and do it in order for me to learn the material, whatever the material is. And that's my learning style. And I can't imagine with that being part of my learning style that if we had kids out there that's also their learning style, are they missing that piece to help them to learn?
Well, and I have 3 children of my own who don't write in cursive, and signatures are horrible, and they can't read in cursive either. And I know we have historical documents that are definitely written and scripted in cursive. And so, it was interesting to me when, I'm talking about Jesse Miller again and how, like, he is the master of real world learning. If he's going to teach a math concept, he's going to try to link it to real world learning to make it meaningful. And he and I were having a conversation about our 4th math course a while ago and try to make it more real world. And I said, one thing I see is that students have trouble counting back change. And I've noticed that for my own children too. Like, they can sit there and do algebra all day long, but they can't count change back to me. And why can't they do it? Because they haven't seen it forever, right? Unless they have had a job or they're working the concession stand, they just haven't practiced that skill probably since elementary school. And so it's not that they can't do it, it's just that they haven't been exposed to it for so long. And so maybe, just at the high school level, putting those historical documents in front of students that are written in cursive in front of them, just to kind of keep that skill alive so that, we're just reinforcing something that they haven't seen since elementary school. Again, I don't think it's that, our students can't do it. It's just that they haven't seen it for a while. So, we get so busy in education and our content and what testing and ACT that sometimes, I'll be honest, we forget the practical skills that students need to have. And I think we found that, like, just with kids counting back money. So we do that now, just to get them prepared. So, I think that's really good feedback to us. And I don't think it'd be hard to put some historical documents in front of students when we're teaching them anyway in cursive and say, okay, let's remember this.
I guess a comment about disciplinary literacy, which absolutely, I can remember it, and that kids struggled sometimes with science vocabulary and vocabulary in different disciplines. But that is different than ACT verbal tests. And that's where I don't think that's so much disciplinary literacy, but that is knowing words that would show up in novels, in prose of that sort, and understanding how to identify analogies. So if they don't understand the analogy format to begin with, then they can't solve it on the ACT, or they might understand the analogy format but not know one of the 4 words, which then makes the analogy completion difficult for them. So I see that as vocabulary, 2 different types of vocabulary, that they not only need disciplinary literacy, but there needs, I feel there needs to be some serious literature continued to be taught. And I love young some classics to be read and studied, because that's where they're going to encounter some difficult vocabulary. And it's too bad we don't have Latin anymore. I think I'm the only one in this room that took 4 years of Latin. And I just killed the verbal part of the ACT because I could figure out words that I didn't know because of that background. So I think that definitely has hurt not teaching Latin anymore. I wish we had it.
We English teachers need to stand together.
I know, yay.
Okay,
If I may,
to sum up the course handbook, Jean, I hope the question that you had was addressed. I think the most important side of that is, if I could just quickly review, at the elementary school, our kids have great opportunities going through their specials. They have a great art experience. They have great physical education experience. They go into the library and learn about the library and get on the computers. And, you know, they have these great experiences. And music, I'm sure I forgot something. They have great experience there. At our middle school, I was a former middle school principal. I worked for years to try to find a way for kids to get 3 exploratory classes. And we only had 2 at the middle school where I worked. They have 3 opportunities. Some of them take it as a study hall, but Matt and Amanda have a schedule where they have 3 opportunities for exploratory options when I got here. And that's a good thing. They've got GTT, they've got options. And at the high school level, what's important to me, the document that Janelle shared, is that from January 25th to 29th, they do a student survey. They talk about elective class interests. They talk about social emotional health and needs. And they talk about academic success. So when you have that student input, she's had the meetings about the teacher input. Now we can start to build that. And then we start to hit walls like we've already talked about, and barriers. And we usually can find a way to break through them, but we have to break through them. Things like licensure for teachers, things like time for teachers, scheduling, low class sizes, all those things we have to consider as we work through it. So that kind of sums up K-12, the great opportunities the students have at North Union and have had for a long time. So I appreciate that. If there's nothing else, we can go on to, really, it segues into potential open positions. If that's okay, I'll just carry us on to that. And what I'd like to do, there has been a process already. Conversation has been had with the director of CTE in the state of Ohio. We've had discussions with Tri-Rivers, extensive discussions about, you know, this is an opening we could potentially have. We don't want to irresponsibly fill it. We want it to be high student interest and workforce needs. We had a business advisory council meeting that Matt attended. Matt, if you could kind of share the summary of that meeting, what they talked about our local workforce needs.
So during that meeting, I took like 3 pages of handwritten notes, and then I tried to distill it into a 1-page summary. And it turned out that my summary was probably more disjointed than my handwritten notes. And the problem was there was so much great information given at that meeting. Wonderful group of people. Our staff made some great presentations to the community members that were there. Some overarching themes that came up, and I'd like to touch on a couple that maybe aren't as related to the engineering opening, but logistics training came up twice, and I think actually maybe 3 times as it relates to e-commerce. A couple facilities opening up in Union County where there's a lot of job opportunities. I was kind of surprised that came up as often as it did, but it was a topic of some discussion. A second theme was integration of technology. I made notes. Basically, every employer that spoke talked about integration of technology into every single aspect of every job that they are that they're trying to fill right now. It's interesting how that sort of thing really ties into Gene's point about electives. The day of this meeting, I had lunch with 3 classmates of mine who are in very different fields. One's an electrical engineer by trade, and he's an administrator now. One is a middle school art teacher, and one is a civil engineer who works as a civil planner or a city planner in the public sector. And this topic of what to do with industrial technology came up during the lunch, and then the rest of the discussion was over. There was nothing else happened. All 3 of those guys were very involved in industrial technology when they were in high school. And as we approach, we're almost 30 years out of school. They talked about how every day in their careers, they're very different careers, how every day they use skills that were taught by Mr. Metzger was the teacher at the time. And the importance of hanging on to, 2 of those guys are directly, they hire people directly in our county. They talked about the importance of maintaining that program. They were very upset that anybody was talking about messing with it. So it was the evolution of that program was, yes, and how that's followed them throughout their careers. So as that discussion continued during that meeting, Mayor Giroux was sort of a bridge into what we're talking about now. He brought up that he felt like there was a need for 10 agricultural technicians, what used to be called a mechanic, in the northern part of this county. I think if anything, Scott might be a little bit low as far as what the need was. And he talked about how different that's become in the last 10 or 15 years. You're always going to have to, if I have a problem on a combine and I can hear a tick in the engine, I need somebody that can fix that. And if my auto steer goes out, I'm pretty crabby about that too. And a lot of times it's the same guy that comes out to fix it. So as we talk about revamping this industrial technology, I think there's great opportunity. Janelle talked a lot about it for an engineering type program, and the job opportunities there are endless. If someone wants to go into, all three of my friends, they all went on to college through different paths. But if you wanted to graduate with a degree in engineering and go on to fix machines at Honda, the representative from Honda was very adamant about the need for people to be able to repair the machinery there. If you wanted to go directly into the workforce, I think there's tremendous opportunity there. This program has a lot of potential to fill these jobs at every single one of these employers. One, setting up shop right here, in Richwood, was looking for 50 candidates, and he had some very specific skill sets that he was looking for. So I think the opportunity for an engineering program that could tie some of our kids that are going on to college is great for them, and some of the kids that are going directly into the workforce is great for them as well. That's what I took away from the meeting. We really have an opportunity here to provide something for all of our students through this program. And Mr. Baird, I'll turn it back over to you and see what you thought of it.
So yeah, I saw the very same thing, what I heard in that meeting, if I could capitalize opportunity within our county and within our area, with COVID-19, they said they're at a negative unemployment rate. Like they have to import people into the county in order to fill positions. So our kids need to know this, our families need to know this, and it does cover a little bit of everything. And again, and I think Janelle already talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to touch on it. And Janelle, you can add a little bit to it if you'd like. But we're partnering with our chamber to give the youth science exam. And what that does is it identifies aptitudes in science, and it identifies interests in science, and it identifies kids and tells them, it gives them a report that says, hey, these are careers that you could really look into, that you should really look into based on what we're telling you. And then as a school district, we could purchase some of those reports and kind of compile that information, and our chamber is willing to help with that because they don't want to import people for jobs. They want us filling those jobs and pointing the kids in the right direction. And Janelle's got a little bit of a timeline already where we're going to be administering that test. So Janelle, if you could briefly touch on that.
Yes, so our freshmen will start taking this test on Monday. It's a 90-minute test. The youth science test is 90 minutes long, and I will send this document that you have in front of you in a Google form to you, and it has a hyperlink where you could click on it. You could even take the test yourself if you want to see what it's like. But it's a 90-minute test, and it's really looking at your interests, which are important, but also your aptitude. So you play these like brain games. So I've taken it, and one was like, you have to do all of these, you have numbers and you have to figure out what the pattern is. Like, is it +2 and then ×3 and then +2 and 10 ×3, and then you have to fill in the next number in the pattern. It looks at your spatial awareness. So basically it's trying to say, here are your interests, but also here's your aptitude, and how does this align with different career clusters? Because here's what I think happens. We have a lot of students, I think, in our community after 5 years of being here and working with them. is that they don't think that they are STEM kids. Maybe they take our traditional, how we teach math, you know, how the state wants us to teach math. They take algebra and they don't see the link to the real world. That we have a phenomenal Algebra 1 teacher, which I'm super excited. I'm seeing a lot of more linkage. But they don't see the link between the math I'm taking and the real world because it's kind of just taught in this abstract bubble. And so they consider themselves not to be a STEM kid. Or maybe they just don't love doing school, but they're the same kid who will take your lawnmower apart and put it back together, you know, or that same kid who can figure out how to program something on their computer, and they're really intelligent and they're really capable. It just doesn't necessarily come through the traditional school curriculum. And so then these kids think that they can't be a robot technician or a mechanic or, you know, something like that, but really they are very skilled. So Use Science has them do all these kind of brain games, and it will show them, yeah, you really do have an aptitude for this. So that gives us an opportunity to talk to these freshmen when we get the reports back and say, you know, why don't you try this elective in engineering? Why don't you try this elective in ag or this elective in healthcare and see if it might be for you? It would also help them figure out which career pathways at Tri-Rivers might be a good fit for them as well, because Tri-Rivers is on fire right now. They're adding programs, they're updating programs. I mean, their new administration is really driving things. I'm super excited about what they have going on up there and align kids with what's going on at Tri-Rivers. So it just gives us another data point, because when kids typically take a career interest inventory, they go towards the arts and entertainment and like things that they enjoy, but not necessarily are the viable career fields available in our area. So it's just another data point for kids that we can use as a counseling tool to help direct them into career fields that they may not have otherwise considered. So our 9th graders are taking that the next 2 weeks. And then our 7th graders, they will all take it as a shorter version of it before April 15th. So in countywide, all 7th and 9th graders will have taken this by April 15th. And then we'll be able to have reports back about what the students' interests are. Actually, we can get those on the school side sooner, but I think our Union County Chamber businesses would like to purchase reports so they can get an idea of where their talent pool is. And then there's an internship match, and we are about to launch internships next year with our seniors. Carrie Williams is our teacher at the high school who's helping me coordinate the internships, and we have the county chamber hooking us up with many business partners who are like, yes, we want to give internships to your students. So this internship match will help them know where their talent pool is and will help us hook up those kids who have that aptitude with those businesses who are looking for those specific skills.
Thank you, Janelle. And so in conclusion, we've done our homework if that retirement does happen. Up to this point, we've done our community connections. We've done our discussions within licensure. The part that we're still waiting for is that student interest survey. Okay, so we got to make sure that that matches up. And then once that's complete, I'm going to feel like that we've done what we are supposed to do when we do have an opening to make sure that we're filling that opening with what's best for the kids in our district. So we're at a good spot there, and I appreciate all the work that's been done up to this point. We also have, as a part of this, what was brought up when this was brought up to me through last year, through part of our cuts, we talked about Nick Cage, our athletic director, took over the Dean of Students job, and our intention was to open that up next year, the Dean of Students to our teaching staff. Again, that's an important role. And we're looking at doing that. That'll be an opening that we know that's already there for next year. So, and Nick's done a good job of filling that in and supporting that in the teachers at the middle school. So, any questions about that? Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Chapman, for all your information. So, just to summarize, it sounds like if the retirement does happen, we have a good, I think, pathway with engineering, and it sounds like we have a potential in-house candidate to fill that and move that forward. I think we're all comfortable with that, and then Tri-Rivers with all the advancement that they're making, and continue on with our students going there, maybe for more advanced classes that we wouldn't offer.
They have robots that we don't own.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, good. Thank you, Mrs. Chapman. 3C, the future of the Digital Academy, I'll just kind of give a intro into that. I was discussing with Mr. Baird about, I have a cousin, she's kind of involved in the horse world, and she is like, I'm going to homeschool. I said, no, you're not going to, hang on a second. How can we help you here at North Union, stay involved, but also do what you love to do? Because one of the lessons learned, I believe, is some of these kids have found things that they love to do outside of school, whether it's, training horses or whatever that may be. This is just one example that I have. But how can we keep those students inside of our umbrella without losing them to the homeschool environment, keep them involved in our curriculum and with our teachers and our administrators and our extracurriculars, but also we've allowed them to explore things that they love to do outside of school. That's one of the lessons that I think we've learned as well. So I asked Mr. Baird is how can we keep our digital academy and maybe evolve that digital academy to touch some of those kids that love to do other things outside of school, but also keep them involved in our digital academy with our teachers and our people. So I'll just kind of let him go into that a little bit.
And briefly, that discussion led to, and you guys remember a year ago, I said, I don't know how I knew this, but a year ago at this meeting, I said, we need to start looking at digital academy because a digital academy type model, because we have, X number out getting homeschooled. We have this number at Trek Academy. We have this number, poor attendance. And it's a K-12 something that we need to start looking into. And, at that point, it wasn't urgent. We had a million other things going on, and we kind of said, okay, let's look at it next year. Well, all of a sudden, we had to create it. And teachers are doing an outstanding job. Students have engaged in it well. Parents have to do a great job. And we're starting to build that profile of what a good digital academy student would look like. And it's not one of those things, well, I'm having a little bit of trouble at school or I'm not showing up every day, so maybe I'd be better at the digital academy. We'll have to look at that right profile of student that would fit into that digital academy and kind of personalize it. And then the other obstacle there is how do we staff that? Can we staff that how we're doing now? No, we're not going to have the availability of our high school and middle school teachers to have that extra digital period. But again, these are barriers that we can look at and problem solve and say, okay, can we move this staff to here or that staff to there? Or how do we look at funds to create that? Or however, or does it bring back enough money to justify hiring that teacher? So I think that is something that we're looking at. We currently have 210 students in the digital academy. I would say that many of them meet the profile, some do not, but we will have to survey the digital academy population to see who's interested next year and what kind of staffing and programming that'll take next year. And we're definitely open and actually looking forward to seeing what that looks like.
Any further discussion on that? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. DeCamp.
Mr. Baird, what, just off the top of your head, do you know the breakdown between the different building levels for the 210 that you stated?
I do.
I can pull it up here real quickly to give exact, do you want percentages or specific numbers, Mr. DeCamp?
I believe I have 56, Brad.
So, yeah. So
I
I have
schools 70, about 75 right now.
and 81 at the elementary right now.
Any other questions?
I would just make a comment that I can remember teaching and having a student come back to North Union who'd been doing maybe Trekka or some other online learning, and it was difficult. So if we can somehow continue the digital academy so that if a child moves back into the school, they're familiar with their teacher, the content. They're at the same spot that other children their age would be, because would be difficult. Kids would come in and you didn't know what they'd done, and they might not remember what they'd done. And I'd love to see it continued.
We do have quite a bit of movement, and not like some school districts, but there is some transient population. And another lesson learned is we tightened up our open enrollment, so students aren't moving in mid-year to the district and open enrolling here, which might lose some opportunity for us, but setting that deadline kind of settled in. And I think those are some of the things that we have to look forward to with both the Digital Academy and continuing with the open enrollment. So. Yeah, that'll happen. We'll know that number. We'll try to line that up with when we schedule of who would have that interest in the Digital Academy. And I can share that with you. Yeah.
And then are we losing any homeschool funding still at all, Mr. Murniak? Do we still have any homeschool funding that we're losing currently, even with the Digital Academy that we have?
We don't lose homeschool funding. Are you talking funding to other digital schools?
Repeat that.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Repeat that, please.
What all I'm saying is for homeschooling, we don't lose any money. You know, if someone decides to keep their kids at home, now we do lose that FTE, you know, as far as counting for our funding, but also we're, you know, for lack of better words, on a guarantee right now. So that doesn't affect us, but we do lose money if they go to a different digital academy, you know, because then the dollars follow them to that digital academy. So obviously that would be the one goal of the digital academy is anyone that has gone to like, I don't even know what they are anymore, K-12 or whatever they are, bring those kids back on in because as we, you know, ECOT's gone, those type of things, you know, these digital academies for the most part, they seem to pop on up, make a few dollars and then they close down and those kids are kind of left in limbo. If we can provide some stability to them, you know, by having our own digital academy here, you know, to bring them on back to us, and then we also retain those dollars.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Thank you. 3D administrative job description review. Mr. Baird sent that to you guys last night. So if you guys went through that, I don't know if you had a chance to, but there's like 90 things listed on each. So, you know, as we've cleaned up a lot of things throughout our strategic plan and throughout all these processes, I didn't know if that's something that we as a board need to look at, or you as the administrative team, is that something that you'd like to do? Is just clean, you know, there's things on there that have nothing to do with some of their jobs. So I know some districts I've went through that even at administrative level was maybe solidifying exactly what our administrative team does at those levels. I can't imagine looking at 90 bullet points and saying, you know, and trying to accomplish all those goals. Even you know, there's not enough hours in the day, days, weeks in a year to do that. So
half of me, I almost want to joke because most of our administrators are on here. I want to know what those things are so I can ask them. No, I'm just kidding, guys. But what I will say is every year we sit down and go through professional goals with each of our administrators. And that really hones down that list of things to do and we focus in on it. But I'll be honest with you, just this week, I asked our directors to say, you know, give me a list of everything that you do. And I could take a half hour to read all those things to you because they have a whole bunch of responsibilities. And those responsibilities sometimes put you in a hole for days at a time where you're analyzing data or you're doing reports for ODE or you're doing, so they can't leave them off. I mean, there are things that have to be done. So I have lists and lists, but what I do every year to help with that is sit down with every principal, assistant principal, every director, every supervisor, and we really hone down on what it is they're trying to do. And we kind of go by that. Now, last year, what we honed in on in September wasn't what we were working on in June because of the changes that happened. And I really try to keep it, honestly, the focus between 2 and 3 items that we really hone in on. And you guys do the same things with me, right? So, we continue to do that. So, so I will continue to do that. And I can, these guys can list forever and ever, just in one day, fills up a whole sheet of things that they have to do. And that's everybody from our principals, our chief academic officer, our transportation supervisor. It's a lot of work. So yeah, so that is something that we can clean up the job descriptions, but that's something else that we'd have to do. And there is a point where we can go in and do that. I mean, I saw on mine where one of the things that I have to know how to use is a telephone. So those kinds of things might be cleaned up a little bit. Yes.
3E, 504 IEP implementation discussion. I had brought this topic up. One of the things that the 504 hits home with me, IEPs maybe for other people, but the 504, for example, executive function. Is my mic on yet? Executive functioning, and I have 1 out of 3 on a 504, and I have this discussion with Mr. Baird a lot, is what are we doing for our staff and administration is allowing some of those 504 implementation plans. I always had the ability to go out and have a professional 504 written, but some people don't have the ability to do that. So what can we do as a district? I had this discussion with Mr. Baird a lot. Maybe this is being done, and he'll kind of walk you through what they do, but how can we do some of those 504 things or IEP things or whatever it is to a student that doesn't have a 504? He doesn't have the ability to go out and get a professionally written 504 like I had the ability to do. What are we doing as a district to help a student that might have executive functioning note-taking issues? Are we allowing them? There's an app called Glean that I learned about through a college that we were looking at, that they turn it on their phone, they set it on their desk, and it dictates to them what the note-taking was during that class. There's an app for that, okay? So little things like that are out there that just would help a student during a note-taking session that, my son has a hard time listening, writing the notes down, and doing that process, that's a struggle for him. So what is out there to allow our students to evolve, and maybe something small? He wouldn't have the GPA he has if he didn't have this 504 written, for him as written. But some kids, like I said, don't have that. But can we identify something as small as taking notes and turning on the Glean app or whatever else is out there for them to help them be successful? So I brought that up to Mr. Baird. He had some good points, and he kind of talked about what they do. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Do you mean a student who, because a lot of students are identified, teachers contact the office or the parents come in, but somebody that's kind of borderline, just doesn't quite meet the 504 criteria. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
So, and I'm going to let Thomas talk a little bit more about this, but what we
just wait a minute. So I really like that you brought that up, Brian, because, and this might help help Thomas too, but when it comes to my learning style and how I learn, that's how writing helped me. So like when he was talking about this app, I carried a recorder around. So, and I really didn't learn how to learn until I got to college. And I got to take a course in how to study and how to meet my type of learning style. And once I was able to tap into my learning style, I could learn anything. So, and I think that's one of the things that I keep trying to draw at. And I like the idea because it's what he's talking about is the same thing for me when it was the recorder. And I would play it back because I was hearing it, but also I was doing my notes at the same time. Like it may have taken me 4 or 5 hours, but it was 4 or 5 hours of my quality learning time. So what he said is basically tying in on my type of learning style. And I know that there are kids like me.
So, and thank you for that. And what I talked to Brian about is we have an intervention assistance team process starting, clear back in preschool. And what that intervention assistance team does is it identifies through instruction struggles that the kids may have. And to then intervention assistance team, you might bring incompletion of homework. You might bring, they're just not learning to read. It might be low test scores. It might be executive functioning skills. They're sitting there in class and just not taking notes. And they go through that process, and sometimes it's just based on data. They look at the data and say, we got to get, and they go through that process and come up with a plan. And that plan sometimes resolves itself because there's a plan. And teachers follow the plan and it resolves itself. And sometimes it escalates into either a 504 plan or a plan for testing for intervention, individualized education plan. So we have that at all of our buildings. And you got to understand, a learner in first grade, a child in first grade is going to look a lot different than they look as a child in 12th grade. So that plan doesn't necessarily follow them all the way through, but it certainly could change. So with that, I'm going to, hopefully I've described that initial part of it, and all of our principals and guidance counselors do a wonderful job of that process, and it continues. But Thomas, if you could talk for a second about 504s and IEPs and to make sure that we're catching all those kids.
Yeah, so one thing too, that I know we give the state a lot of jump with some of the things it's putting in. One of the things that came out, of course, is third grade reading guarantee. There's a lot of things with the program that we don't agree with, like the retention clause. But I will say one thing that it has done though, is giving those diagnostics now in K1, 2, and then the Ohio State test in the fall in third grade. We are catching kids that we might have not caught during the normal school year. We didn't have third grade reading guarantee going on. I hate to stereotype, but it's just known that we normally get more boys referred for special education than we do females. Doesn't mean that there aren't girls that need special ed services. It just means that normally they're better at masking what is going on with them. So these assessments like this are letting us catch kids that we normally wouldn't have. They normally would have kind of fallen through a crack initially. And so that has drastically helped. IAT programs in the buildings are very good at catching kids, whether those children go and move on to an IEP or a 504 or wherever they may be. The IAT team always ends with saying, have we given the child the supports they need to be successful so they no longer need to meet on a regular basis to update our plan, or do we need to meet again because we're noticing some success, but the child is still not reaching their full potential? So the IAT team allows for a lot of continuation of services, whereas before, in going back to when the Individuals with Disabilities Act was first coming in, it basically was you had intervention done twice, you refer them for special education. If they didn't get in, that was kind of the end of it. The kid kind of just fell off. They didn't meet special education criteria. And then as on Bravo 504, you went and did a 504 plan. Well, now the IAT criterion is that it is definitely progressive. It does not end after you do something for 4 weeks. We don't say, okay, we did this for 4 weeks, it wasn't working. Oh, but you're not special education. Well, there goes all your supports. That doesn't happen anymore. We continue the process all the way through. And what's great is our guidance counselors at the end of every year meet. So Tammy will meet with Amanda to say, here are the IATs that I ended the school year with. Here's who needs to be continued at the middle school. And the same thing with Amanda up to Jen, is that it just continues so we don't have those kids drop out of transition. One other thing that has helped is the switch to online testing, because the state used to basically say that you could get accommodations and modifications if you had an IEP. You could get accommodations if you had a 504, and that's kind of like where we left it. Well, now the new testing has added a new criteria called accessibility options. And those are things that we never used to have. We didn't really have a need for paper-based testing, like it is a line reader. It is, a text-to-speech. It is dictation. It's things like that that when we were giving paper-based tests weren't a major deal. But what those things do is the only way that a child can receive an accessibility option or accommodation or modification is they also have to get it in their classroom for all daily work. So we're noticing that, okay, a child does benefit from that, but we're not going to give it to them only twice a year when they're doing a state test. It's something that they need to do everything throughout their school career. So any child going through the IAT process or has a 504 or has an IEP, the teams are actually sitting down and going through that child and saying, okay, what do we think could actually truly benefit this child that we can try to give supports? It also helps people that we come into education, we're expected to be the expert right out of the gate. You're 22, here's your classroom, be an expert on everything. It's a good framework to give ideas what to try, because if you weren't trained to be an intervention specialist, you don't know a lot of the interventions that just come naturally to an intervention specialist because you were taught in intervention. So I think all those pieces, the continuation of IAT, adding a new technical component that we get to do for all kids now instead of just certain students, has really helped us kind of catch students that may have not been caught in elementary until the gap got so big in middle school. Now we're realizing, okay, now we have a really big gap when you do something major. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. I mean, there are still going to be some students that unfortunately just stay on a cusp. But I will say that with everything going on, the IAT process and everything the principals have done has drastically changed the landscape of the way all interventions have looked in the district.
So you can hear that process, and there's really, just like every other framework, there's three very important parts of it. There's the identification part. Are teachers, students, and parents involved in that? Absolutely. There's the implementation part. So how do I know that what these kids' issues are? Well, you were at the meeting when we talked about the interventions, and you were at the meeting when we identified this. And then the end is, okay, now how are we doing? Do we move beyond this? Do we take it up a notch? Again, teachers, parents, and students are involved in those conversations. I'm going to ask Dar really quickly, just because I know she might keep track of this, but how many IAT meetings have you had this year? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. So do you mean a total, or we meet we meet every 6 weeks, because we begin the year with taking our data and creating a list of students that we feel are vulnerable. And then we meet, and then we narrow it down to who we're going to target. And then we invite those parents in. We have individual meetings. We set up the IAT process, the goals that we want to see for those kids, so forth. And we collect data, and then we meet again in 6 weeks. So if you're looking at that number, we've met 2 times already this year. So we collected the data, and then we've met with the parents 2 times. If you're looking at a number of students involved in the IAT process, we've got probably 5 to 6 per grade level, minus in the 4th and 5th grade, because we like to think that we weeded it out by that point, and we've already been able to, we're offering help to those students. And I agree with what Thomas says, the 3rd grade reading guarantee, even though we see it sometimes as a thorn in our side, it is a way to help us. I mean, we've already been pouring over the data for the fall scores of the 3rd grade reading guarantee, even though we don't have the retention piece this year. If the students don't, we're still treating it like we do, because we feel we owe that to those kiddos. So I don't know if I answered your question, Mr. Baird.
You did. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So I guess that's all great information. Thank you for all that. I guess when I get something from the high school and it says, if this student turns in a late homework assignment, he will be docked, or she, 25%, but he doesn't have a 504, he doesn't have an IEP. Is that So what is our end game with that? Because as a parent, that affects me monetarily. At some point in time, that's going to affect me as the parent. So what are we trying to accomplish with that type of, you as a teacher, you'd probably be able to answer better than I would, but so what is the end game with, I guess, with something like that for a student that maybe does have the executive function or some type of weakness, but because it's not written, he's getting penalized, he or she is getting penalized for, for that. So I guess that's where I'm trying to, what is our end game with that type of wording, or I don't know what are we trying to accomplish with that, I guess. Maybe you can, what the homework policies or whatever it is.
So I think what you're talking about is we're looking at strategies that teachers use to motivate and to get students to work. One of the things one of the ways that we're trying to think differently about that is with the growth mindset type of conversation. And like I told you earlier in the meeting, the classrooms last year looked like very similar to what they did in 1890, to be honest with you. And so when you approach the idea of homework and grading, it's a long instilled process that we have had for years and years and years. We've made great strides in talking about grading by bringing rubrics more on the forefront. We've made great strides to help kids, just like what you're saying, Brian. We're able to identify and have plans for them. I think what I'm hearing you say is you're concerned about that kid that's getting that lower grade, not because they don't know the content, but because they don't have executive function identified, and then they get a lower grade. So the end game isn't where we want it to be. So we need to make sure that we're identifying things or not. We have to recognize that and then take a closer look at our grading practices. And Jean, if you could give more input onto that, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
If I make an assignment for an essay to compare two different short stories by the same author, and I think, and when I did that, when I first began teaching, I didn't do near the preparation that I learned to do. And education definitely changed, and teachers learned how to teach better, I think. But I'd give them a rubric, and I would give them a real specific set of directions. It made it easier for me to grade because it became less subjective for me as an English teacher. But if a student doesn't turn it in when it's due, then I don't have the opportunity to grade it and work with them. And then they've got another essay coming due a couple of weeks later, then everything you get this bottleneck. So I can see, and I'm sure there were assignments, here's your due date, but you've had maybe 5 weeks to get it in, or 4 weeks, or really, English teachers often do rough drafts, and then you get an opportunity to clean it up and stuff. So I can definitely see if you are doing the work of teaching, you've got to see this material, this product from the student in a timely fashion so you can work with them and move on to the next. But working with them, right. And I think most teachers do make, even without 504 plans and things, make accommodation because you get to know your students pretty well.
That goes back to the relationship and culture. If you have a good relationship and a good culture in your classroom, then that student is more apt to probably turn the assignments in on time and do it. That's in game. What we've said from our strategic plan all the way down through is having the right culture and having the right relationships with our students, and all the way down from the board, all the way down the community to the board, all the way down through our students. And that's, I think, where it starts, in my view. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Baird?
I would say that our discussions early in this meeting with that relationship with our community definitely made things specifically better for us as a district. And I think we model that from the community to the Board of Education, the administration, all the way down to the staff and students. And we have that understanding. And it's really hard when we start looking at individual cases, because in the end, we personalize it, and just like what you said, Gene, you get to know that student, and sometimes it doesn't look fair. And there's people have made millions of dollars writing books saying fair isn't always equal, or those kinds of things. And it is again, it's like making the decision that the excruciating decision we had to make earlier. Sometimes teachers are fronted with that decision right there. How am I going to deal with this child? If I go this way, I've got this. If I go that way, I've got that. Do they need more structure, or do they need more content? Do they need more responsibility, or do they need more support and help? And those are decisions that they're making on a daily basis, every single day. And I'd like to say that most of the time our teachers get it right, and we continue to have these conversations and work through those things.
Good discussion. Anybody need to add anything else?
I would just like to say that in my own house, I mean, we have a student, one of our sons has an IEP, and all three of them have very different abilities, different learning styles, and something that's cropped up since March that I didn't see a lot of before. All three of them, we have trouble with turning assignments in on time, and we have to stay on top of them more, it seems like. As far as when this is due, okay, now you need to start it now. And I'm hoping that as we get back, because we didn't have that problem when they were there 5 days a week. And I at least I really hope that it kind of goes back to normal if we can get back into a 5 day a week situation. But I've seen it in my own house that we really have to stay on top of all three of them as far as assignments being turned in on time.
One of the things that I can add, Chuck was a real busybody when he was little. And one of the things that we had to keep reiterating with him, and I think he finally caught on when he was about the fifth or sixth grade, is that when you do your work on time, it's actually less work.
It's easier.
It's easier and it's less, but it's less work. And you will get to do more of the other fun things if you turn in on time. And it took us, I mean, sitting in this room, and because this is where he went, it took us a while to get that instilled in his head. But I think that quality that he learned early and carried on through school and the school system also did a lot of promotional things during junior high and high school to promote that, also continue that. I think that's what his success was going on into college and into the workforce. That I think that somehow we got to teach them that if you do your work and you do it on time, it's easier and you get to do more of other things.
And not everybody will do that at the fifth grade.
No.
We'll get it figured out earlier.
Yep. Right. Yep.
Yeah, and Gene, your mic wasn't on, but you're just sharing that it could happen at any time in their career. 5th grade, 10th grade, 12th grade, college, 30 years into a career, it could happen.
Mr. Eric, go ahead with your Tri-Rivers update.
I've been looking forward to this since I started putting this together yesterday. Janelle has already said a lot of great things about Tri-Rivers. I will let you know that Tri-Rivers will be at a hybrid model until January 29th, and then it'll be reviewed again. So I wanted to kind of give that little update to you guys. And what I have is a paper in front of you with some pictures. And then also I have 3 videos that they're short videos that I thought you would really enjoy. It has to do with our students. So what I did was I just kind of went back in the last week at Tri-Rivers, and these are Facebook articles that showing the public what's going on and how their money is being spent, which I think is a really good marketing strategy for them. So on January 14th, which is the blue section, this is the level 1 engineering technology students, and they finished their Yakaka FS 100 certification. And usually it takes 3 weeks, but this year it took 4 months. So you're going to see that this COVID has affected how soon they can get their certifications in. And then on January 20th of 21, the TRCC level 1 engineering tech students, last week they finished their FNUC H2OP certification, and I have no idea what those mean, but these certifications are worth 6 points towards graduation, and it would cost them $2,000 to be able to do that. And I really like that they did that they put in like what they saved by doing this program in high school, because I think that's something also that even North Union can do. Like let the public know by them taking this class, we're saving them this much money for the future. And next up is this next certification, and they said, great job. So I wanted to also do something for the adult ed education program. And so on January 21st, they congratulated with a real nice ceremony for these Tri-Rivers Adult Education Welding, Fabrication, and Allied Process Program completers. And they said, what a special class. We made it through the 650 hours and 100 days of skills training during COVID. Each student received several tough and obtained welding certificates, including a Techna Avon earning of a high pressure pipe weld certification at a first. And then they honored the person who had perfect attendance. Their main instructor, Tom Reynolds, said that welding is an art, and watching for more stories in depth. And when they were talking to me about this particular area, and that's why I decided to let you know, they have some of these men that came through this program that their skills are like almost perfection at this point, as early as they are. And so these are the people these welders that are doing these big constructions, they're looking for these people. So I thought that was really good. So the highlight of the videos that I'm going to show you also will contain to this, but yesterday, North Union's sophomores some of the sophomores had a chance to go. And so we had students there learning about the different programs, and they got to choose like maybe 1 or 2 or 3 that they could go to and spend some time with them in each one of the programs. So Rich is going to show you some videos that's going on. And Janelle, some of the people that you'd mentioned.
Hey there, Wildcat Nation. This is Mr. Souls at Tri-Rivers. We're here today focused on your future. And we got with us a student here, Autumn Breitenstein. She's from North Union. We also have some of our level 2 students here helping us out with Focus on Your Future. Let's start out with Autumn. Autumn, tell me a little bit about your experience today here in the Auto Tech lab.
It's been good. I just took off a tire and then I made sure the tire was leveled over there.
Okay. And then tell me why you think it's so important to have that hands-on experience to actually see the lab.
So we actually get a visualization of it where we can see if this is what we want to do. And I personally like it.
So you think you're going to be coming here next year, Autumn?
Yep.
Awesome. And then here in the background, I'm going to have one of our level 2 students speak. This is CJ Temple. CJ, tell them a little bit about yourself and your experience here at Tri-Rivers.
The past year and a half or so, I've been in Auto Tech and Tri-Rivers. It's been great. It's like the whole family here. Everybody supports you on everything you do. It's just
Awesome. Well, we're going to be putting this video out. If you have the opportunity, please go to our Facebook page. And again, we have these young people representing the Auto Tech program here at Tri-River.
These are from Whirlpool. These are North Union kids. There's two more. Okay.
Hey, Wildcat Nation. This is Mr. Sauls. I'm the building principal at Tri-Rivers. We're here today Exploring Careers Day, and we got a lot of students coming through today looking at all the amazing programs. Program that we are at today is our Construction Trades Academy. I'm going to go ahead and take this time, let this student introduce themselves. We also have the amazing instructor for Construction Trades Academy. That's Mr. Willie. And so we'll go ahead and start off with the student. Go ahead and introduce yourself, buddy.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm John Hughes. I go to North Union. I'm a freshman this year, enrolling in the Construction 10 program. I'm here walking through, and my experience has been great. Definitely looking forward to doing it next year.
Awesome. And then what would you say to your friends at North Union why you felt that this was important to come out today?
I mean, all the hands-on experience that you'll get, it's going to be so much better than in the classroom.
Awesome. And then I just want to again introduce our instructor. That's Mr. Willie. Mr. Willie, tell him a little bit about your experience here at Tri-Rivers and your amazing story once being a student here.
Yes, I actually graduated from the school, but I can tell you this for sure. In the construction classroom, there's so many things that you'll be able to learn here. There's a variety of different construction skills that you can take out and apply to a future successful career in the construction industry. A lot of fun. We get to do a variety of different community service projects as well. I love being a student here. I'm actually a graduate of North Union Local Schools as well, so I'm a Wildcat alumni as well as a Tri-Rivers alumni. Great school, great program. Also, shout out to all the academic Tri-Rivers teachers too. We have awesome academic teachers here as well. So you'll love the school. Have a great day.
Awesome. So again, we just want to thank you for coming to visit today. And I noticed you were here with your father, and don't hesitate to come back and visit us. And again, I challenge all the rest of you that are interested in the career pathways, please set up an appointment if you'd like to come visit, because it makes a difference to come and see all of our labs as well as our instructors. Have a great day.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share those few things with you. And the other video would have been a young lady at the bottom, and they had interviewed her yesterday during her focus time, and she's a North Union student. So Megan, but anyhow, I can't say enough for what I see there and what I hear. I just can't say enough. Now they have upped their classes besides the technical part for the government and the English because of the level of students that we have there currently. So I just really encourage, I'm hoping that whenever we go back, because there's a couple areas that they've already changed, and they've been changed for almost a year now, but because of COVID. So when we go back, yeah, you'll see some more changes. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mrs. Eric. 3G, discuss B6. Mr. Staley, I want to move this to executive session. Can we do that without going into executive session now? Can we move 3G to executive session at the end?
Yes.
Since we didn't call for any modifications to the agenda, but go ahead and move that to executive session. That way we can let our administrators go after we finish up with everything else. Okay, thank you. 3H, graduation discussion. Mr. Baird and Mrs. Chapman, I'm sure you guys have some input there for graduation.
Mrs. Chapman, you want to share that what we've talked about? I've talked about it briefly and about the senior group that you meet with, and I've had discussions with the health department saying that they see us having a graduation possible outside, although with some limited attendance, but we will have loved ones with them and they will be able to walk across the stage. But any updates other than that, Janelle?
I have been meeting with senior parents via Google Meet every month since I think October. So I know, having had a senior of myself graduate last year, class of 2020, and not having a graduation ceremony and the normal senior things, that was quite a loss, for our family. We really missed those opportunities with my son. So I do feel the pain of senior parents in the wake of COVID, and the senior students as well. So I decided to be, really proactive and involve the parents. And I also have a senior meeting set for Wednesday where I'll be Google meeting with all the seniors, just to keep everybody informed, to give people an opportunity to ask questions. But the senior parents, I've shared with them, it'll probably be an outside in the football stadium graduation. We write these proposals to the health department to get their feedback on kind of what our parameters are going to be. I have money set aside that even though it could be an in-person graduation, we may have to limit the number of guests that are able to attend. So we have money to do the live stream, so that if you have, family at home who can't come, that they would still be able to see it live. And then also we'll take that live stream and make a recording of it, post it on our website that you could watch it anytime, but also people can download it too if they just want to keep it. So that is the plan. Graduation is set for June 4th. And since it will likely be outside, we should probably consider a rain date also. Having done graduation ceremonies outside in other districts in the past, I've also just mentioned to the senior families to kind of hold that day open in case there would be a rain delay and we would have to push it later or earlier a little bit. I've been in that experience too in other school districts where we've had to be a little flexible if like a little stray storm is passing, moving the time a little bit. And the parents, are on board with that. They are just, as long as they get an in-person graduation, they really want that, and as do we. So we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. I've also talked to our parents about the senior banners. So the parents wanted the senior banners hung up in town again. And so we met to talk about fundraising options Thursday night. We had a Google Meet to talk about fundraising for those banners. And Richwood Bank once again stepped up, and they're paying for it in full through the coffee donations so that we don't have to raise funds for the banners. They're going to take care of it. So how grateful we are for Richwood Bank once again coming through to support our kids. So we will have senior banners hung up in town again. And then the seniors, once we're done with the banners, we have them in the office and the kids can come pick them up. And I know some students use them for like a senior graduation party over the summer and a keepsake in their keepsake box or whatever. So that's kind of a nice gift for seniors as well. The other thing that people are asking me a lot about is prom. And, I've talked to Mr. Baird about this and the parents too, and then I will talk to the seniors on Wednesday as well. Could we do prom outside? Think like under the stars or something, but push prom later into May when it's a little bit warmer maybe, and try to do some kind of prom outside. If you look at our senior class right now, they've not been to prom because they didn't get to go as a junior. So if at all possible, I want to give them a prom, and just have to figure out how that looks, and then just pray that this other strain doesn't hit us in March and walk our plans back. But so we will be working with the health department on that and say, what can we do about a prom? I don't foresee us being able to go to all occasions and shove 150 kids in that ballroom and have a prom in there. So I think we're going to have to probably move the venue outside, but it could be like a super memorable, really beautiful event too. So, so we're just waiting on kind of as we get closer to spring, writing those proposals to the health department and seeing what we're able to do.
Could we utilize the new facility for prom? And you got the big garage door and you got the walkway between the two buildings and you got all that new blacktop space that we got rid of all the stones, and maybe we put a tent up in front of the old new, is that something that we could utilize? That's a lot of space there, Mr. Baird, between the new building gymnasium and the new blacktop area that we have. That might be potential of enclosing that at some point. Spreading out, be able to spread out and be outside and inside both.
The conversation so far with Jason and really the other district superintendents has been open, but they're kind of afraid to have those conversations yet. They really want to get these vaccinations through, and that has been a topic for the last 2 or 3 meetings that we've had. It's come up. We've kind of addressed what our dreams and hopes are, but we haven't been able to nail down anything yet. But I'm sharing with them all that stuff that Janelle's sharing, and hopefully we can move forward with that.
Item 4, community engagement. 4A, revisit the mental health Memorial Hospital Richwood Bank Union County partnership.
Actually, that is the Mental Health Recovery Board Union County partnership. And really, Scott has this update. Scott talked to Mayor Giroux, and not a great update, but this is what we have.
Yeah, I talked to Mayor Giroux. As we all know, there was an issue with the deeds associated with that land. Unfortunately, the attorneys for the Village of Richwood did not feel comfortable moving forward. And now the funding has passed. The funding basically ended at the end of 2019. What all I left it with Mayor Giroux was, should funding become available again, maybe we need to go back and revisit a more of a lease type situation, which we had at one time talked about, but the board didn't want to move forward with that option. But maybe we need to revisit it because of the need for our community. That maybe it becomes a 50-year lease or something like that, to where they maintain it, and then eventually it does come back and is owned by the school district. But that way we can at least get something available here in the community. But at this time, until additional funding comes available, it's not viable.
I know that was a couple items for a couple of you. Any comments or questions, concerns on that? It sounds like it's pretty much dead in the water at this point, but revisit it when the time comes. And one other thing we didn't have on here, well, I talk about 4B, I guess, we're volunteer and parent access.
So the volunteer and parent access, and the principals have already been having these conversations. I know Dara at the elementary level has been, what can we do to start looking at Wildcat readers and volunteers coming into the building? And also just the parent meetings that need the more personal approach rather than trying to meet online. And what I'd like to talk to with the administrators at our administrative meeting this month is switching the conversation. The conversation now is, we're going to have our IEP meeting online unless you can't do it online, and then maybe we'll make arrangements for you to come in. Maybe we can say we can meet live. We got to make sure we have the space. We have to make sure it's safe. We have to make sure all those involved feel comfortable and safe. But if you can't do that, we can still meet online. So do you understand how we can kind of switch that conversation? I would really like to get through most of February for that. And then just because the vaccinations and the just not knowing where the new strand or whatever Jason talked about this morning is going, but we are going to have those conversations at our administrative meeting to where we can turn that around. So.
Any questions, comments on that? All right.
And then Nick is actually coaching.
That's okay. So 4C, we're going to add Mr. Murniak. He's still on there? Yeah. There he is. So the donation / fundraising money, we have that line item now on our, from the Impact 60 money, and then money that we can continue to get in from outside sources, whether it be NEWAC money or individual donations. A lot of school districts, as part of their organizational meetings, they have a couple members of the board. What did we? How did we word that? Committee. Yeah, finance committee / how did we want to word that? Basically, some type of subcommittee, some type of.
So what we talked about, Scott, was so when we get donations, the donations are kind of, and sometimes when we get the donations, people say, hey, I want it spent on this, or I want it spent on that. To ensure that that's happening, we have a finance committee that meets on an as needed basis. And within that finance committee, you can either do it through the finance committee and make sure it's spent the right way, or you can assign a subcommittee of people involved in that spending. So let's say somebody comes in and says, I'm going to give a $10,000 donation, but I want it to be all English literature books. And so that would involve the English department. Okay. Or it's going to be all athletics. So that would involve the athletic department. So I think the best thing to do is, rather than reinvent the wheel, we already have a finance committee involved. The finance committee, hey, we've got these donations. How are they being spent? And that could be the report to the board. How do you feel about that, Scott?
Well, I guess this kind of, one thing that we have to understand is a donation to a school district means that the school district can do what it wants with those funds. That's truly what a donation is. If they come on in and they say, well, I want you to buy this, that's really not a donation. So, that's one thing that we have to be well aware of. Now, I think that we have made that our goal, that whenever someone does contribute to the district, we try to do what they want. But then if, we're giving them carte blanche that whatever they give money for, that we're going to go ahead and do that regardless. We then need to evaluate every bit of money that's coming on in as far as any kind of donation to a school district, because we don't want something coming on in that maybe has costs down the road that the school district either can't afford or doesn't want to invest resources into. So I'm okay if we want to do, some kind of a subcommittee or something like that, or we make it a part of our regular finance committee meeting, which we, haven't had those scheduled very often. Maybe this makes it where we have those on a more regular basis. Just to give you an idea, all the money that we had received prior to the Impact 60 donations has already been spent. That money has been, it was used for the weight room. It was used for various things within the building. We have received so far $75,000 from Impact 60 and from Honda Marysville. Right now, already we have expended quite a bit of those funds. We bought a dedicated floor cleaning machine because of the size of that building, especially that sports floor. We needed something that could really get it cleaned in a timely manner. So we purchased a machine specifically for that building. We also then bought an organizational system for the storage room, so that every single sport gets a certain bin. Mr. Hajar would be better to explain exactly how that works and that system, but that's going to be installed here in about 5 or 6 weeks. Then the other thing that was a part of that donation, which we had to use those funds for, is we're going to have to do signage. We're going to have to do all the Impact 60 signage, what we named the stadium, all those type of things. So all of that's going to be about $10,000, I'm hearing from Mr. Hajar. So you look, and then that first $75,000 is pretty much gone. Also, I am trying to get to where maybe I'll attend a booster meeting and a NEWAC meeting once a year, just to see what all, is going on. Like, we've had the discussion about renovating or doing some kind of an improvement to the existing NEWAC booster concession area. You know, unfortunately, we have not been able to get together to really find out or determine what all that project's going to be. But that we know that that's something that we do want to do. We do want to improve those areas, but we also want to be, you know, responsible whenever we make those improvements. You know, there was a one-time talk about tearing down walls and those type of things. Well, if we're changing the actual architecture of that building, that grows the cost of any kind of improvement like that greatly. You know, we got to get an engineer involved. We've got to get certain building plans done. You know, and then you have ACA or accessibility issues. There's all kinds of things that start becoming a play in those. So, but as far as putting together any kind of a committee, like I said, I think that the suggestion that Mr. Baird said was maybe an offshoot of the finance committee would be a good plan. And then I think that myself and at least Mr. Hajar, because that's normally where most of our donations are coming, are through the sports aspect. Mr. Hajar needs to be a portion of that sports committee, and then we need to pull individuals on in depending on either the donation or where additional funds may be coming from.
Okay. So 1 year ago today, we were sitting here discussing, we had the soccer discussion. And so that evolved, and they had a successful year, Mr. Baird, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
And I know the discussion will probably come to the point where we're going to want to play on the football field at some point under the lights and those types of things. And maybe even have I know with the drawing, Mr. Muniak, you had done from the architect, there was additional practice fields on that drawing. So now we're talking about our football field / soccer field being used, more often. Which will require additional maintenance. And if the soccer team wants to have a practice field at our high school, which we do have drawn on our board over there, what, as a board, what do we want to, I guess that's something we need to talk about. I didn't think of it until now. As soccer continues to grow, and I think it's going to be here to stay, is that something that we need to look at allowing additional, I guess, practice fields to be talked about or looked at our high school, because they were out here behind this building. It's not a full-size field. It's not regulation size. I think we need to allow them to have the access that all the other sports in our district have. I think it's only fair. So we need to have that discussion on where that's going to, because that's going to be an expense, additional practice fields, additional maintenance for a football field, those types of things. So
I think in the agreement for a club, I think we review that in March.
Okay.
And I will look for that proposal to come forth for a club.
Mr. Muniak, do you have any comments on that, on additional practice fields, or what you think on that as far as with the drawings that we have? Like, do you have any idea what we'd be looking at cost-wise, or?
I really don't. That's something that we would have to get with the architects about. Probably the biggest issue is, is basically moving dirt, but also whether or not if we need to have any kind of drainage under that facility. So that's really the biggest thing that would probably be the biggest expense. It's something that I can get with our architects about and ask them to actually put together some numbers, put together an actual plan. We would obviously have some costs associated with that, but then we can go on out to various contractors in the area, or if we know anybody, to have them give us proposals. Again, that's one of those things, since it's not a school building, we don't have to go through the formal bid process. We can just get some quotes. I think any kind of time we do a project like that, it's always best to get at least 3 quotes, but there's also an advantage to going with that, in that maybe those contractors can bring some different ideas that maybe the architect or engineer didn't think of, that might either improve the facility or reduce the costs.
Good. Okay with that? Okay, thank you. All right, any other discussion on the community engagement? Yeah. Well, board action items, we're going to discuss this in an executive session before we vote on it. So administration, thank you for all being here this morning. Go out and enjoy this beautiful sunny day, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much this morning.
Thank you guys for your Saturday morning. We really appreciate you did a great job, and thank you for being here.